Hi, welcome to Rules Challenge. My name is Carter Maxwell, and hopefully you already noticed from the thumbnail that this is not actually a rules challenge. This is going to be a playthrough of the game Dune, War for Arrakis. I don't know if I'm going to be doing a lot of playthroughs in the future, but when I was making my rules challenge video for this game, I spent so much time with it that I thought I might as well take advantage of that and do a playthrough while I've got the rules rock solid in my head, or at least pretty solid. This video may take longer than a regular playthrough would have. I do edit out all the time I spend making decisions, but I also spend a lot of time discussing my thought process. One thing that I wish was done more in playthrough videos is players talking through their thought process. People are normally trying to be competitive and don't want to give too much away, but I like understanding, not just what people are doing, but why they're doing it. And so, anytime I'm making a decision in the game, I'll talk about why I'm doing it. And sometimes I will, go into a fair amount of depth, talking about what my different options are. I'm recording this now actually after having finished the game, and it ended up being a lot longer game than I expected. You'll hear me at least a couple times going, well, it's pretty much over now. But spoiler alert, it's not just about over. There are some close calls, and it turned out, in my mind, to be a pretty epic game. And if you stick it out to the end, I think you'll agree that it's pretty amazing how tense it stays throughout most of the game. To keep the length of the video down, I do edit out some of the upkeep stuff, like when players are rolling their dice at the start of a new round and putting it on their dashboards. But anytime a player is making a decision, I do make sure to show that. And I should mention, if you've seen my Rules Challenge video, you've already seen me use these. I have some of my own tokens that I use in the game to keep track of things when the battles get complex. I have an asterisk token that I use as a reminder of a surprise attack. And I will sometimes use discs to represent shields and cubes to represent swords. But I don't think that ended up happening a lot. And I think it's pretty clear at the time what I'm using them for. Well, I think that's all I have to say in advance, so let's get started on the playthrough. We've done the new cards phase, so both factions have drawn 2 new cards, and the 3 new prescience cards have been drawn. And now we're doing the Harkonnen's vehicle placement phase. In the first round of the game, they get 3 harvesters, 2 ornithopters, and 1 carryall. They'll place an ornithopter in this central area just because I like that a lot because it gives you a lot of flexibility. And then they've got a pretty strong legion right here that probably is the one they'll send out to try to do some damage. So we'll put an ornithopter in this air zone as well. For the harvesters, they've got a lot of options. The one thing they do want to avoid is this sector here, because they won't be able to protect it with a carryall because that air zone's already blocked. So they'll place one here, and here, and here. And then they'll place the carryall here where it can reach any of these 3. Now we're on to the action resolution phase. The players have already rolled their dice and placed them on their dashboards, and both players ended up with pretty unbalanced rolls. Now the Atreides need to decide if they're spending their Bene Gesserit token. And I always like to spend it right away because the desert powers in general in the first round are fairly weak because there's no worms on the board to work with yet. And then a consideration that's specific to this game is the Atreides secret objective card is really heavy on yellow, sand dwellers. And so they're going to be focused on trying to get those prescience cards. And in the very first round here, we've got a prescience card that will give them 3 on sand dwellers. So they want to be laser focused on that. And that one says, if Jessica is in a sector not containing a Harkonnen Legion, spend 1 action die and place Jessica in the regeneration tank. So we've got to make sure we can get Jessica deployed out onto the board. So I'm going to put this in the deployment area. Now the Atreides get to take the first action turn, And by the way, that prescience card I was looking at is one that you can claim during the action resolution phase. So I want to just get that done as quick as possible. So I'm going to spend that Bene Gesserit token right away and deploy one deployment token and 1 leader in the same siege. So I'll take our Lady Jessica figure and a random deployment token. That prescience card called for Jessica to be in a sector where there was no Harkonnen Legion, and the 2 sectors that are hardest for Harkonnens to reach quickly are in this corner and this corner. So we'll put Jessica and the deployment token down in this siege here. The Harkonnen can kind of guess what the Atreides are probably up to here. This prescience card here looks like a likely candidate, or this one here where Jessica and Paul have to be in the same siege. If it's the one with Paul, that wouldn't necessarily make much sense that they felt the need to put Jessica way out in the corner of the map. So it's from the Harkonnen perspective, it's probably more likely going to be this one. But there's not necessarily much they can do about that since the Atreides don't have to wait till the end of the turn, and the Harkonnen legions just can't get there very fast. So the Harkonnen might just have to console themselves with the fact that if the Atreides do this prescience card, they'll have to spend one of their action dice, and they've only got 4 left at this point. Another issue the Harkonnen need to deal with is just the simple fact that their dice roll was so unbalanced. They have limited ability to get any new units out on the board or to make any surprise attacks with their leaders. One obvious thing to do would be to just start spending Mentat dice and accumulating some planning cards and see what they have to work with. But they'd rather at least be able to spend one of those using a leader's ability. And it is feasible for them to get Thufir Hawat into the game pretty quickly because they only need 1 supremacy point to do that. So they're going to see if they can just quickly get to a siege, destroy it, and get Thufir into the game. So they'll spend a strategy die and move 2 different legions. They're going to use troop transport, so they'll remove this ornithopter here and move this entire legion 2 spaces, 1, 2, to this space here. They'd love to be able to move them a second time this turn, but they can't do that. So they're going to start creating basically another strike force here. So they're going to move part of this legion into the next space over. So that's at 5 units. They'll move 1 more to make it 6. Now the Atreides are up, and in a bit of a bummer for them, the Harkonnen Legion happens to be making a beeline for one of their level 3 sieges. So they'd really like to get that prescience card claimed, but instead they're going to try to get some units deployed to that siege. So they're going to use this house die and use it as a deployment die. They'll grab Stilgar here and a random deployment token, and they'll place them in this siege here. Now the Harkonnen are up, and they're not loving that siege they were going toward suddenly got beefed up big time. But they are loaded with dice for strengthening their own legions. So they're going to go ahead and spend a house die. And they're going to use the Baron's ability, which says replace 3 regular units on the board with 3 elite units. And they'll do that replacement in this legion here that's been on the move in the desert. So they'll remove 3 regulars and replace them with 3 elites. Now the Atreides are up, and they actually have a little bit of a trick up their sleeve here, potentially. They've got a card that allows them to choose a sector and then roll some combat dice and possibly remove some Harkonnen vehicles. And this would be a great way to get rid of that ornithopter that would enable the Harkonnen to reach that siege but they'd really like to use it on these 3 harvesters that are all grouped up in the same sector. So they're going to hold off on that for now and instead make sure they get this prescience card claimed. All right, looking at that card again, and it is an action resolution phase card. It says, if Jessica is in a sector not containing a Harkonnen Legion, spend 1 action die and place Jessica in the regeneration tank. So they'll spend a leadership die and confirm that there are no Harkonnen legions in her sector. They'll remove her from the board. We'll place Lady Jessica in the regeneration tank. They'll move up the Sand Dweller's token 3 spaces, 1, 2, 3, and that'll bring the Reverend Mother Jessica into the game. Now we'll replace Lady Jessica with the Reverend Mother Jessica, and replace the leader card with the Reverend Mother. Now we'll move that spent die up to the used action dice area and advance Reverend Mother 1 space in the regeneration tank. The Harkonnen need to decide if they are strong enough to go after that siege yet, and they're not feeling that great about it, so they're going to go ahead and spend a Mentat die and just to draw a couple cards. And I have to admit that I don't have a great sense yet of whether red cards or gray cards are better in certain situations, what they tend to be helpful with. So we'll just draw one of each. The Atreides are going to have to use Desert Power at some point here. And in the first round, that's always tough because there's no worms to work with. But they're thinking they can put some pressure on the Harkonnen on this weak legion in the North Pole by putting down a couple worm sign that would enable them to do a quick attack. So they'll put one here and one here. Harkonnen are struggling with whether or not they should just go for it at that siege or make a turn and go for one that's a little less protected but harder to get to. For now, regardless, they're probably going to need more cards to sustain an attack on a siege. So they'll go ahead and spend a Mentat die and draw a couple cards, just one of each type. The Atreides would love to use the Fremen rockets to get this Ornithopter out of there. That's the one that allows them to roll some combat dice and use hits to remove vehicles. But the Harkonnen have two house dice that allows them to just rebuild their vehicles. So that seems kind of pointless. They should probably be spending their last house die for deployment. But they have this card, Chat the Leaper, that allows them to place 2 Fedaykin units and a naive bleeder in the seats. So that's the better option for getting some more troops out on the board. The Atreides are going to spend this house die as a Mentat die, and they'll use the Reverend Mother's special action, which says draw 2 planning cards, then play 1 planning card. So they drew 2 new cards. Both of these are really interesting. One is Shai Hulud, which will enable them to get the Wildmaker into the game. And then the other one is Voice from the Outer World, which allows them to place Paul and a Fedaykin in any legion, which would work really well with one of the prescience cards they'd like to complete. But getting that Wildmaker into play is just a little too enticing. So they're going to go ahead and play that card, and they can put the Wildmaker into any empty desert space. And they'll go with this one right here, because that gets them in immediate striking distance of that legion. And even if it moves a couple spaces away, they can likely hit them unless they retreat back into the mountains. And they'll bring the Wildmaker's leader card in spent. All right, the Harkonnen are kind of annoyed with that development. So they're probably just going to concede that this is not the round for them to have a big campaign. Most of their cards and dice are really better suited to building up for the future anyway. So they're going to go ahead and spend the strategy die so they can move out of harm's way of that Wildmaker. So that'll allow them to move 2 different legions They'll remove this ornithopter and move this legion 2 spaces. Actually, they'll move into the mountains, 1, 2. And that legion's still just at 5 units, so they'll reinforce it using their second movement to bring this Sardaukar in. The Atreides are still thinking about using planning cards. We've got this one for getting Paul onto the map to use with that prescience card. They've got this one that would allow them to go after Harkonnen vehicles, which would be nice. If they could get rid of a couple of those harvesters, it'd be great. And they've got this one that's for getting a couple Fedaykin out on the map, and that's awesome too. They're going to spend this turn actually setting up to use this planning card. This is the one that'll allow them to place Paul and a Fedaykin in a legion and then move or make a surprise attack. So they're thinking that if they do a desert power and put out some worm sign, they can get Paul into play and then move these deployment tokens, which are pretty much going to waste because they're defending a siege that's just to value 1. So they're going to do a desert power this turn, and they'll place a couple worm sign out here that will connect them with another siege. The Harkonnen have pretty much decided they're just going to hunker down for the rest of this round and build up for a big campaign next round. They're going to go ahead and get some more cards. Now they're at 6 already, but they know there's a couple that they want to play, so they're going to go ahead and spend a Mentat die anyway for a couple more. And they'll add those to their hand. The Atreides are going to spend their final die to play a planning card, and they'll play this one they've been preparing for. It says place Paul and 1 Fedaykin in any legion. So they'll place Paul and a Fedaykin right here. Then move or make a surprise attack with this legion. They don't have anyone they can attack. Well, I guess they could attack this harvester, but they're not going to do that. They're going to instead move. They've got the swarm sign here, so they would be able to sand ride up to this siege. So they're going to do that. So they'll take all 3 of these pieces and these 2 deployment tokens and move them up here. The Harkonnen are going to spend a house die to play a planning card. And it'll actually work out to be 2 planning cards. The first one will be Emperor Shaddam IV enters play. So we'll bring his figure into the area and put his leader card into play. And then it says, then play 1 planning card. So then the Harkonnen will also play the Polar Cap Factories. And this will give them a chance to reinforce that weak North Pole settlement. That says, place 2 regular units, 1 elite unit, and 1 Bashar leader in the North Pole settlement. All right, so we've got the 2 regulars, 1 elite. That actually puts them over their limit, so one of these regulars is going to have to come back off, and then a Bashar leader. The card also says, then discard all worm signs in areas adjacent to the North Pole settlement. And we just have the 1, so they'll take that out of there. And that'll end their turn. The Atreides are down to just desert power actions, so they'll go ahead and attack with the Wild Maker on this Harkonnen Harvester, which feels like overkill, but they're hoping that during the Desert Hazard phase, they'll have a chance to respawn the Wild Maker anyway. So they'll remove the Wild Maker, remove the Harvester. The Harkonnen will spend their final die to play a planning card. They'll play this Moving the Battle Group card, which says place 1 Bashar leader and 2 elite units in a free mountain area of your choice. So they'll go with this mountain space here, place the Bashar leader and 2 elites. And they're thinking either they might be able to pull off an attack on this siege before it gets reinforced, or if nothing else, make it so these pieces don't feel free to leave that siege and go get this ETS token. Now we're into the desert hazards phase, and we don't have any worm sign we need to discard, so we'll go ahead and start placing worm sign. And it looks like there's just 2 places that it'll be needed, one on each of these harvesters. Now we can start revealing worm sign. That'll be a worm. Nothing. Worm. Nothing, because that's burrowing. And we have one more down here. Nothing. Now the Atreides need to resolve these 2 tokens that call for worms. And they're just thinking about whether or not they want to bring the Wild Maker in. But these are both kind of far away from where they think the Wild Maker will be most needed. So they'd rather be able to bring it in exactly where they want it. So they're just going to put a regular worm here and a regular worm here. This worm is in an area with a harvester, and it needs to either be removed or saved by a carryall. So the Harkonnen player will remove this carryall to save it. Now we would resolve Coriolis storms, but there aren't any Harkonnen legions in areas that are subject to that, so we'll skip over that phase and go to spice harvesting. The Harkonnen have 4 spice to spend, and it would take 6 to keep these 3 markers in place, so they'll give up on the one that allows them to do scouting. So they'll drop that down and activate that ban. So they won't be able to do any scouting next round. And then to finish up, they'll remove their 2 harvesters from the board. Now we're into the end of the round, so the Atreides can claim end of round prescience cards. They've already claimed 1, so they could only claim 1 more. They're going to go with this one, the Fremen call Paul the Maudie. That's the one we had talked about earlier. It says reveal a siege in the same area as Paul. So we'll reveal this token, and that is a level 2 siege. And the Atreides will move up 1 with their green token and 1 with red. They're both still at 0, so we'll just move them both up to 1. Now the Atreides need to decide what they're going to do with this leftover prescience card, if they're going to shuffle it back in or not. And they're going to hang on to it because it calls for Jessica and Paul to be in the same siege. They've got Paul on the map already. If they can just get Jessica in with him whenever this comes back into play, that'll be an easy 2 green, even though they don't really need green all that much. So the Atreides player will shuffle that back in. All right, we're into the new round. The factions have already drawn their 2 new cards. We've drawn the 3 new prescience cards. So now the Harkonnen have locked a die because of this marker having moved down a row. And now they're ready to place their vehicles. This time they'll get 4 harvesters, 2 ornithopters, and 1 carryall. The Harkonnen player doesn't have much of a sense of what the Atreides player will be trying to do in terms of these prescience cards, but one of them does call for them to move into legions into 3 plateau areas, and the easiest way for them to do that is with these legions here that are right up against this large expansive plateau. So if they try to do that, they'll be moving inward, so maybe putting some harvesters on the outer parts of that sector is a good way to go. So they'll put a couple out here and place a carryall. And the Atreides have vacated this siege, so there's not really any nearby legions to mess with the harvesters. So the Harkonnen will put a couple down here as well. Now, as to the ornithopters, their main concern is that their strongest legion be mobile. And the only air zone that's connected to that sector is this one here. So they'll make sure they put an ornithopter there. And then they'll put one here, which is just a pretty versatile area. Now we're into the action resolution phase. Players have rolled their dice, placed them on their dashboard, and now the Atreides will start the action turns. Before taking their first action of this round, the Atreides are going to fix a mistake. It turns out that they had spent 2 dice in the previous round without advancing the Reverend Mother, so she should actually be 2 steps farther ahead on that regen tank and back into play. They need to take a second to think about what they're trying to accomplish this round. So they'll take a look at the 3 new prescience cards. They need to get to 10 on the Sand Dweller, so this card is really valuable to them. This one will call for there to be 3 Atreides legions in 3 plateau areas, which is always kind of a pain because that means you got to send your legions running around to areas that otherwise probably aren't too useful. But they're going to focus on that this round because that would be really helpful to them. This one, not so much. They only need to get the 3 on red. They've got 1 already, and this would give them 3 more. So that's not a priority. And this one would be pretty useful. It'll give them 1 green and 1 red, and that would be for attacking a Harkonnen legion that's not in a settlement and doing at least 1 damage. Their more immediate concern, though, is getting some protection for this level 3 siege that has this big Harkonnen legion bearing down on it. The most obvious way to do that would be to spend a deployment die, but they actually have a planning card that's really useful for this, so they're instead going to spend a Mentat die and use the Reverend Mother's special action that says draw 2 planning cards, then play 1 planning card. I'll flip that, move it off the dashboard. They'll draw a couple cards and then play 1. And that card says place 2 Fadakin units and 1 Naive Bleeder in a siege of your choice. The Harkonnen rolled 3 Mentat dice yet again this round, so they're really wishing they had Thufir or Gaius in the game. For now, they're going to spend a strategy die and use the Emperor's special action. And that says replace 3 elite units on the board with 3 Sardaukar units. So they'll flip him, move him off the dashboard. They're going to do all 3 replacements in this legion here to continue their efforts to turn this into a juggernaut. So we've got 3 elites here, and we'll put in 3 Sardaukar instead. The Atreides would love to be focusing on the prescience cards right now, but this Harkonnen legion here is just too big of a threat to ignore. 5 Sardaukar is just ridiculous. Any attack they do will essentially be against a defender without shields. So the Atreides have to figure out a way to soften them up a little bit, at least so that they can at best take 1 settlement or 1 siege this round rather than 2. One way they could approach that is to spend a deployment die and try to get some more units out on the board. But they're going to have 3 desert power actions this round, so might as well take advantage of having the Wildmaker in play. So they're going to play the Wildmaker's leader card for its special action, which says place 1 sandworm in an empty desert area of your choice. Now, the question of where to place the Wildmaker is tough. The most obvious choice would be right here, within striking distance of anything close to the siege. But the Atreides are actually going to go with this spot here. For one, because if Beast Raban is placed into this legion, they won't be able to use his special movement ability to move out this way through this space. They'll have to use an ornithopter to get over a shield wall. And this still keeps the Wildmaker within striking distance so that if they want to attack the siege from a position of safety, they'll have to use 2 ornithopters. They're going to have to get into this space here and then use an ornithopter to get from here to the siege. And anything the Atreides can do to at least make sure they're using up some vehicles and some actions to launch this attack is good. Also, from this position, it makes it tough for the Harkonnen to just decide to go this way instead, because still crossing over this shield wall keeps them in danger. And again, they're going to have to move in efficiently if they want to stay safe from this Wildmaker. Well, the Harkonnen are looking at some extremely well-defended sieges right now. We've got 4 units up here, presumably, and Stilgar. We've got 4 units here, including a couple Fadakin and 2 Naib leaders. We've got what's probably 7 units, and Paul and a couple Naib leaders. But on the other hand, they have a ridiculously strong legion themselves. So what they're going to do is make sure they get these guys into position for attack, and then maybe position a second legion in a position to attack, depending on where how the Atreides react. It's maybe a little bit crazy that they've got these 4 pretty powerful leaders just sitting here off the map, but it's kind of tough to get them into play because they don't have any deployment dice. But they do have some planning cards that should help with that a bit, and that they'll be hopefully using on a later turn. For now, they're going to spend one of these leadership dice, and they will move 2 different legions with a leader. First, they'll remove this ornithopter and move this legion 2 spaces to here. Then they'll remove this ornithopter and move most of this legion, we'll leave a regular behind, up to here. Now, if they get an ornithopter back onto the map, they'll be within striking distance of either of these sieges. And with a new ornithopter here, this legion will be in striking distance of either of these sieges. And they do have a house card to help get more vehicles on the map. There's no way for the Atreides to know exactly where the Harkonnen attack is going to be directed, but they know they've got an extra turn here because the Harkonnen are going to need some ornithopters or be moving pretty slowly. And the early game for the Atreides is often just about using deployment dice to get some more deployment tokens out on the board, and they do have a couple of those dice, so they might as well take advantage now. So they'll spend a deployment die, and then they can put a deployment token and a leader out. Might as well take advantage of the Reverend Mother here, which would give a couple shields on a star roll. This is a really good deployment token. So they're trying to decide if that changes their plan at all. But I think they'll go ahead and put it down here. This is a level 2 siege that they do want to protect. And they're hoping this will encourage the Harkonnen, if they attack with this legion, to go this way, which is just a level 1 siege. And then, this legion is powerful enough now that they definitely could go on the offensive if the opportunity presents itself. Either just launched against these guys, or if these guys clear out of here, to go against the North Pole. The Harkonnens' entire previous turn was based on getting more ornithopters out on the board this turn, so they'll go ahead and spend this die to do that. And that'll allow them to place 2 new vehicles of their choice on the board. They'll place one here to make sure they can transport this legion, and they'll put the other one in this air zone. They were going to put it here, but then realized that this accomplishes the same purpose, but also gives them the option of doing something with these legions instead. The Atreides are going to try to keep the pressure on the Harkonnen. They're going to spend their other deployment die to play a planning card, and that's Smugglers. It says Gurney Halleck enters play. Place him and 2 elite units in any empty desert area. So they're going to put them right here next to the North Pole, but far enough from a Harkonnen legion where they would have to waste one of their ornithopters to get to them. And then they need to bring Gurney's leader card into play. He doesn't actually go on the dashboard. I guess I'll just, he's got a house marker or a house icon on him, so I'll just put him down here. Well, the Harkonnen need to decide how bothered they are at the prospect of losing the North Pole. And at first it didn't seem like that big a deal because they only have 1 die, the Atreides only have 1 die left. So if they attack here, they probably have to forego complete an oppressions card. But unfortunately, they've got this one here that's, basically just says that they have to attack a Harkonnen Legion in the settlement, and it's worth 3 prescience points. So that's really, losing this settlement is really a 6-point loss for the Harkonnen, which is pretty terrible. That's basically a third of what they expect the Atreides to need in this game. They're going to play this they're going to spend a Mentat die and play a planning card, and this says place Beast Raban and 1 elite unit in any legion. So they'll place Beast here and an elite unit, and they're still within their stacking limits. Then make a surprise attack with this legion, and they'll use this Ornithopter so they can reach Gurney Halleck's legion here. All right, I'm going to put my little surprise attack reminder out here. And it looks like the Harkonnen will get 6 dice and the Atreides 2. The Harkonnen won't play any planning cards, and the Atreides won't play any either. They're not going to be able to save themselves, and Gurney's accomplished what they wanted anyway. So roll the dice. All right, we've got 2 shields for the Atreides. 3 stars total for the Harkonnen, 2 shields and 2 swords. One of these stars will go to waste for the Harkonnen. One of them they'll assign to the Beast, and that'll become 2 swords. And then this other one they'll assign to the Bashar leader for 1 more sword. So that's 5 swords against 2 shields. So 2 of the swords will be negated. That leaves 3 hits by the Harkonnen on the Atreides. So they'll take 2 on this guy and 1 on this guy and keep Gurney in there and just hope that on the next round that they get a star. And they'll roll again. 6 dice for the Harkonnen, 1 die for the Atreides. Harkonnen will pass on planning cards. Atreides will pass. They'll roll the dice. So the Atreides got 1 sword. Harkonnen got 1 sword, 2 shields, and 3 stars. These shield and sword will wipe each other out. And just with the Beast and this sword alone, that's plenty to wipe these guys out, because 1 of these stars would become 2 swords. So Atreides will take those hits, and the battle's done. Now the Harkonnen need to decide if they're going to advance into that area, but they'll just stay where they are. To wrap up that battle, Gurney needs to go in the regeneration tank. The Atreides player has come up with 3 options that they think are reasonable for this turn. One is to play a planning card, the Fremen rockets, that would be very likely to take out this Ornithopter, and that would really impede the Harkonnen's ability to do any attacks this round. But it would also mean spending the Atreides' last die, meaning they're not going to score any prescience points this turn. It just doesn't feel like taking 0 points for the entire round is going to lead to good things for them. So they're going to pass on that option. Another option would be for them to go for this prescience card that calls for them, for an Atreides legion to attack a Harkonnen legion not in a settlement and causing at least 1 hit. This seems like a good possibility for that, but this is not a good deployment token. And they have a strategy die instead of a leadership die. If they had a leadership die, that would guarantee them a surprise attack and basically a guaranteed sword with this leader. They'd probably go for it, but this just seems too iffy. So instead, they're going to go for this prescience card, which I talked about earlier. They could spend their strategy die and use Stilgar's special ability to move 3 legions. And this requires that there be Atreides legions in 3 plateau areas. So they'll spend the strategy die, and they'll flip over Stilgar's leader card and slide it off the dashboard. So now they can move 3 legions. The riskiest one to move would be here, because it would for one, open up the siege or make it more vulnerable. And if they move into this plateau, the Harkonnen could possibly attack and knock them out of there and mess up that whole plan. So these three look like the best options. So they're going to flip over their deployment tokens so they can split up their units or their legions. And let's show this one and this one. So down here they need a regular and an elite. And here they need 2 regulars. And over here they need 2 regulars. This situation always raises the question of whether you're better off moving a unit with a leader or just moving it alone. The advantage of moving it with a leader is if the next round you roll mainly leadership dice, you'll be able to move this legion because using the leadership dice, you have to have a leader with the legion. But they're just going to keep the leader in place and move a single regular unit to the plateau there. And then over here, they're actually going to change their mind. They didn't need to reveal this token because they're not going to move these guys. Instead, they'll move 1 unit here, and then they'll move these 2 together to this plateau. And now to wrap up their turn, they'll move that die up into the used dice area and advance Gurney in the regeneration tank. Well, the Harkonnen would really like to get one of these leaders out into their big legion before it attacks, but there's just not a way for it to happen now. So they're going to go ahead and spend a Mentat die to play a planning card. And that planning card says, Killers Without Mercy. Attack with a legion containing a Sardaukar. And this legion has plenty of those. At the end of each battle round, you may continue the battle without taking 1 hit, even if the defending legion is in a siege. So they'll be able to attack here using this Ornithopter and not have to pay for each extra round of battle. So they'll remove this Ornithopter so they can attack over 2 areas to the siege. We'll reveal the siege, and that's a level 3, and we'll reveal the deployment token. Oh, and that's not looking too good. I had actually misremembered that. I was thinking it was 2 elites. The Harkonnen have 6 units here, and they'll be going against 3 units plus 3 from the siege, so it'll be 6 dice versus 6 dice. And I'm going to separate out the special elites, so I remember to use their special ability. And it's not a surprise attack. We'll go ahead and roll the dice. My initial impression is that was better for the Atreides than Harkonnen, but let's see how it plays out. So these 2 stars will become 1 sword each. And this star will become a sword. Then we can apply our special elites. These 2 will remove 2 shields. These 5 will remove that 1 shield. So these 2 shields and 2 swords negate each other. And yeah, so that leaves 3 hits by the Atreides and 2 hits by the Harkonnen. The Harkonnen have to take the hits first. They have to take 3. It's tough. Guess they'll replace these 3 Sardaukar with 3 regulars. I'll just move everybody back in here. And the Atreides have to take 2 hits, and they'll take 1 on one of their naive leaders and 1 on this elite. That didn't go so well for the Harkonnen, but they're definitely going to continue this battle. They're not paying for it. It's still 6 dice versus 6 dice, and they'll go ahead and roll them. The star will become a sword, and so will this one. We have 2 special elites on each side, so this shield will be removed, and 2 of these shields will be. The sword and shield will negate each other. And that leaves 3 hits by the Atreides and 4 by the Harkonnen. The Harkonnen have a tough decision here. Hang on to some Sardaukar or hang on to dice. They'll take 2 of the hits on one Sardaukar and then 1 more on a regular. They think they can make up some of that with planning cards. Now the Atreides have to take 4 hits. I'll take 1, 2, 3, 4. The Harkonnen will continue the battle, and it'll be 4 dice versus 4 dice. So now we have an actual decision to be made about playing planning cards. The Harkonnen have a couple of planning cards that they think they can live without, so they're going to go ahead and discard these so they can get the full allotment of 6 dice. The Atreides are going to answer that with 2 planning cards of their own. So we'll go ahead and roll 6 dice versus 6 dice. The star will become a sword. And we still have a couple special elites out here. So that shield will be negated, and so will that one. We've got a couple shields negated by a couple swords. Do 3 hits. The Harkonnen will take 2 on their Sardaukar and 1 more on the regular. And then for the Atreides, this piece is just gone. Now the Harkonnen have to decide if they're moving in. Of course they will. It has to be all or nothing, so they'll all go in there. So they'll remove this siege token, and they get to move up 3 on the supremacy track. So they'll do that. 1, 2, 3, and that brings Thufir Hawat into play. They'll put his figure in the play area, his leader card face up on the dashboard, and that finishes the turn. The Atreides have 2 turns left this round, and both of them are going to be desert actions, so there's not going to be a whole lot they can accomplish. They're thinking the 3 main things they could be doing are attacking this legion here, but that legion is probably going to get even more beat up with the Coriolis storms unless they spend their actions getting back to the mountains. Another option would be to spend the 2 turns moving a worm into range of a harvester and then destroying it. But spending 2 turns just to destroy a harvester doesn't seem that great. I think instead what they're going to do is put down some worm sign, and this is mostly just hoping it pays off in worms in areas where they'd like worms to be in the next round, either to do an attack or to do some sand riding. So they're going to put one here, one to keep the to maybe cause a problem for the Harkonnen if they come this way still this round, and also possibly to spawn a worm here that could either be used for traveling or attacking. And then they'll put the other one here basically for the same purpose. The Harkonnen are down to 3 planning cards, and they want to make sure they use Gaius's ability to draw 3 House Harkonnen planning cards. And they might as well do it now so they can see what they get while they still have 1 more die remaining. So they'll go ahead and spend that die and use his ability. They've drawn the 3 cards, so their turn is done. The Atreides are going to go ahead and attack with the Wildmaker after all. It may be overkill here because the Coriolis storms will probably do a lot of damage, but they expect to be able to bring him back onto the board pretty soon anyway, either through during the Desert Hazards phase when the worm sign is revealed, or next round using his leader card. So they'll go ahead and do an attack. That'll be 6 dice on these units here. All right, there's 2 stars there, so that alone is those do double damage in deep desert. So that'll wipe these guys out entirely. One of those planning cards the Harkonnen just drew last turn gives them a new option that they're liking here. So they're going to go ahead and spend their last die and play this. It says place 3 Harkonnen harvesters on the board, then draw 1 planning card. It's still early enough in the game that they can spend spice for a supremacy point. So if they really can load up this turn, they can get enough to not only buy that point, but bump one of their Imperium markers back up. So they're going to go ahead and place them all in deep desert. The reason they're concentrating them up in this area is they don't expect to be bringing their legions up in this direction anymore. So it would actually be to their advantage if they can cause some worms to spawn up here and not be available to be placed out in some other areas of the board where they do plan on moving. All right, now we're into the desert hazards phase. We don't have any worm sign that we need to remove right now, so we can go ahead and start putting out new worm sign where there's harvesters and legions. All right, now they can go ahead and start revealing. That's nothing, nothing, and nothing. Not a great start for the Atreides. That's deep desert, so that'll be a worm. And that's a worm. Nothing, nothing, and nothing. That's unfortunate for the Atreides again. And these last two, that'll be a worm and a worm. So there are a total of 4 places where worms will have to spawn, so there isn't any excess that the Atreides will be throwing out. They're trying to figure out which should be the best of these 4 locations to put the Wildmaker, and they're thinking this area here. The other 3 locations are deep in the corner, and out here he might be available to help out if any Harkonnen legions come out this way. So they'll put the Wildmaker here, and then a regular worm right here, and then they'll put one here. And that uses up their worms from off board, so now they got to figure out which of the 2 that were already in place they want to move in here. So they'll take that one in the far corner of the map and move it down to this far corner of the map. Now they'll start resolving these worms, and remember, this isn't a worm attack, so these worms won't come off the board. But they will take out these 2 harvesters. And over here, the Harkonnen do have a carryall, so they'll remove that to save one of them, and then the other will come off the board. All in all, I don't think either side can be too disappointed with those results. The Harkonnen avoided having a worm harassing their legion out here in the desert, and the Atreides managed to whittle down the Harkonnen from 7 harvesters to 4. Right now we need to resolve Coriolis storms, and the Harkonnen only have 1 legion subject to those, so we'll roll 2 dice, and it's 1 hit, and they'll take that on one of their elites, turning that into a regular. Now the Harkonnen can do their spice harvesting. First they can deactivate any active bans, and they're at 8 spice, which is unfortunate. 9's really the magic number. Maybe they got a little greedy and should have put a couple of those harvesters in just regular desert rather than deep desert. So they don't want to lose another die, so they're going to spend 2 on this one. And they don't want to reduce their stacking limit, so they'll spend 2 on the yellow one. The blue one they'll let slide, so they're going to have to activate that ban, which will mean they can't spend planning cards during a battle, or discard them, to gain dice during the battle. So that's 4. They have 4 left. They'll spend 3 to gain a point here. So they'll move up from 3 to 4. And they'll give the Atreides that Bene Gesserit token. And then they have 1 left over, so they'll save that here. And then to wrap up, they'll remove the harvesters from the board. Now the Atreides can claim end of round prescience cards. They only managed to complete the one, which is the one we looked at earlier that required them to have legions in 3 plateau areas, and they have 1 here, here, and here. So they can move up 2 on the Sand Dwellers track. That'll take them from 3 to 5. All right, now is when we'd remove any leftover carryalls or ornithopters, but they're all off the board. And both the Harkonnen and Atreides could replace named leaders with generic leaders, but neither side's going to do that. All right, now the Atreides need to decide if they're going to keep either of these prescience cards in play. This one for 3 Jihad they don't care about, so they're going to go ahead and take that out of play. This one could be useful though, and it seems pretty doable, so they will shuffle that back into the deck. All right, we're into the next round. The players have already drawn their new planning cards, and we've drawn 3 new prescience cards. And the Harkonnen are doing their vehicle placement phase. They are a dice short again this round, so they'll be placing 4 harvesters, 2 ornithopters, and 1 carryall. They're a bit surprised that 5 Sardaukar Legion was completely wiped off the map. They thought they'd be able to accomplish a bit more with them. But they can't be too disappointed with how that last round went, considering they outscored the Atreides 4-2, and a point for the Harkonnen is more significant than it is for the Atreides. And they do still have a couple substantial legions out here. This one is certainly in a good position to put some pressure on the Atreides right away. So they want to make sure that happens, that they have some mobility. So we'll place 1 ornithopter right here, and that could move either this legion or that legion. And in fact, they're going to prioritize this area of the board rather than this one, so we'll put the 2nd ornithopter out here. Because not only do they want the ability to attack this way, if they need to be able to defend this space, if this legion comes sweeping in, they need a 2nd ornithopter in this area to either bring their troops back or advance these guys into that area. As to the harvesters, they're going to stick to their theory of attracting worms to areas that they don't mind there being worms. So they're going to place 1 here, and here, and here, and here. And obviously they'll put their carryall right here. Before they get started on their action turns, the Atreides need to familiarize themselves with the new prescience cards. One of them we saw in the previous round, it got shuffled back into the deck and happened to come up again. That's the one where they need to attack a Harkonnen Legion outside a settlement and cause some damage. The next one is remove 1 deployment token from a siege in a sector containing a Harkonnen Legion. That's tough because they've already revealed a lot of their deployment tokens when they had split up some of their legions earlier. And to give up 1 that's in a sector where there's already a Harkonnen Legion is just asking for trouble. So that's going to be a tough one. And then we've got, let's see, Paul and Jessica are in deep desert areas not containing a siege. Now, this one doesn't specify that they be together. They just have to be in deep desert. And that's certainly doable, although it's always tough to not only spend a die to just send pieces off into the deep desert, but you're probably sending them into an area that isn't that useful. So we'll see if this one comes together at all. For now, though, they're going to make their priority protecting these sieges here that are under immediate threat from this legion. Now, one way to do that would be to get more deployment tokens out. One problem is they didn't roll any deployment dice. They did use their Bene Gesserit token in the deployment area, so that'll help a little bit. But they have a card that I've talked about earlier in the game for removing Harkonnen vehicles, and I think that it's time to put that into play. So they'll play the card Fremen Rockets. That card says, choose a sector containing any of your legions, then roll 3 combat dice. And they'll choose this sector here, which does contain one of their legions. So they got 2 swords and a shield. So that, and now the card says remove 1 Harkonnen vehicle of your choice from that sector or in a connected air zone for each sword or star result. So they can remove 2 vehicles in connected air zones. So they'll take out these 2 ornithopters. And then wrap up, they'll move their die and advance Gurney 1 space in the regeneration tank. Now the Harkonnen are up, and that was really a bad development for them. And the first thought would be, well, who cares? They've got a house die. They can just put 2 vehicles right back out on the board. But they only have 1 house die, and they really wanted to use that to use the Baron's ability, which is great for boosting the power of legions that are out and about, outside settlements. And if they use that die for building vehicles, then that shuts off that other option. But they're going to go ahead and build the vehicles because they rolled no leadership dice this turn, which means that they won't be able to take advantage of the beast's mobility from his special ability. So they've got to have some ornithopters on the board. So they'll go ahead and spend that house die. And then they'll put the ornithopters right back where they were. And I guess we'll have to see who blinks first on this exchange. Well, the Atreides have run out of ways to get rid of those ornithopters. The obvious next choice would be to do a deployment, but they actually want to wait to do that because they're 1 die away from having Gurney available again. So for now, they're going to spend a leadership die and play a planning card again. This one is Dust Chasms. And this says, remove 2 harvesters from deep desert areas of your choice within the same sector. Then take a desert power action. All 4 of these are eligible. Atreides aren't sure which is more advantageous, so they'll go ahead and take these 2. And now for the desert power action, they'll just try to get a couple worms into better position to help out on defense. So they'll move this one, 1, 2, and this one, 1, 2. And unfortunately, they're just slightly out of striking distance of that Harkonnen Legion. And now Gurney is back in play. The Harkonnen would love to be strengthening their existing legions, but they've got to make hay while the sun shines here and get at least 1 siege attacked before Gurney gets back out on the board and another deployment token shows up. So they're going to go ahead and spend a strategy die to attack with a legion. Deciding to attack was the easy part, and deciding where to attack is also easy. This siege here is virtually defenseless. So they know they want to attack here. The question is actually which ornithopter to use. If they use this ornithopter, then this one will still be available for some of the other legions to use and head off in a different direction. But they actually think they want to keep this one available. If the attack is successful and they advance into this siege, they could then use this ornithopter to move out this way toward a siege that actually is completely defenseless right now. And that would be a great 1-2 punch to, within 2 or 3 turns, take 2 sieges. So they're going to spend this ornithopter and do an attack 2 spaces away into this siege. And it is, as the Harkonnen expected, just a 1. So now they need to look at how many dice they'll be using. The attacker has 6 units here, so that's 6 dice. And the defender has 1 unit and a level 1 siege, so that'll be 2 dice. Neither side is spending a planning card, so we'll go ahead and roll the dice. This isn't a special attack, and neither side has a special elite, so this should be pretty easy to sort out. We'll have a shield and sword negate each other, and a shield and sword negate, and that leaves 2 hits by the Harkonnen. That was exactly the number of hits it took to eliminate the Atreides defenders. So the battle's done, and the Harkonnen can decide if they're moving in, and of course, yes, they will. And now they remove that siege token and can move up 1 on the supremacy track. That'll move them from 4 to 5, and they're just 1 away from bringing Feyd-Rautha into the game. The Atreides have other things they'd like to be accomplishing, but they don't want to waste this opportunity to soften up that legion. So they'll do a desert power and attack with this worm. And they have 2 hits. And the Harkonnen will take the 2 hits on their 2 elites, replacing them with regulars. And the worm will come off the board. The Harkonnen are facing a somewhat uncomfortable decision here. This legion at just 6 regulars is probably not strong enough to take on this siege here, which leaves them with the only reasonable option of going this way, which seems like kind of overcommitting that legion, because they can't send just a portion of the legion out here, because they can't get there in just one move or one attack, which means that there'll be time for the Atreides to wear them down. So they'll pretty much have to send that whole legion this way if they want to take it, which seems like a way. They're basically sending these guys out there to die between the worms and Coriolis storms later, which seems like a waste of that large legion, but they also hate to pass up an opportunity to take a free space, essentially. The other issue is, if they're going to spend a strategy die to move legions, they want to have a second one that's truly ready to go, go on the offensive. And that would naturally be this fairly strong legion here, but they really need a leader with that group. But yeah, they've got 4 leaders in their play area just going to waste. And if they move this group before they get a leader in there, that's going to be a lot harder to accomplish, because their deployments are mostly focused on placing pieces into settlement areas. But if they wait a turn to move, giving the Atreides an extra turn to get them into position to defend the siege will probably be disastrous for them. So they're going to go ahead and spend the strategy die, and they'll remove this ornithopter, and they'll move this legion 2 spaces to here and then to here. The Atreides only have 1 desert power action left, and the obvious choice would be to just go ahead and attack this legion with one of these worms. But keep in mind that they still have a prescience card they're trying to accomplish that requires that they attack a Harkonnen legion, not in a settlement, and do 1 damage. So they actually are going to focus on positioning so they can attack with this legion here. So they're going to do a desert power action, but they're going to move this worm 2 spaces into here, and this worm 1 space into here. Now, if the Harkonnen stay there, they're able to attack. If the Harkonnen advance into the siege, they're able to attack. And it starts positioning them to move this strong legion this way, if nothing else, just to take an environmental testing station, but also to start working to try to make an assault on the North Pole. All right, the Harkonnen are going to finish what they came here to do. So they'll spend a strategy die to attack with a legion. Remember, this has to be an attack, not just move in. So they'll attack here. They'll reveal the siege. And of course, it's 1. There's no battle. They'll go ahead and advance. And we'll remove this token. They'll move up 1 on the supremacy track, and that'll bring Fade Routha into play. When Fade comes into the game, Beast Raban has to leave the game. We'll switch out the leader cards, and that'll finish the Harkonnen turn. Now the Atreides want to attack this legion here. The only thing that's given them pause is when they attack, everyone has to be involved, and they'll have to reveal these deployment tokens, and that's going to cause them to go over their stacking limit. So, as an alternative, they could spend an action getting some pieces moved out of that space so they won't lose anyone to overstacking. But they don't. All they're going to lose is a single regular, and it's not worth spending a die just to avoid losing that regular. The other question they're facing is which die to use. Now, the easy choice would be to spend a strategy die and do an attack with a legion. But they have 3 leaders in that legion, and they'd really like to be, trying to maximize their capabilities. So they're actually going to spend this house die as a leadership die so they can attack and have it be a surprise attack. First, they need to reveal these deployment tokens and replace them with units. So we need 2 regulars and 4 elites. Now they're overstacked, so they're going to have to remove one of these regulars. All right, so it's going to be 6 dice versus 6 dice, Neither side needs to discard a planning card, so we'll go ahead and roll the dice. It looks like there's a lot of swords in there. The Atreides have put out their little star marker here as a reminder that this is a surprise attack. And they're also going to move this Fedaykin out here just as a reminder to use their ability. So we'll go ahead and allocate the stars. The Harkonnen have a Bashar leader, so that'll become a sword. The Atreides have Paul and 2 Naib leaders, so these 3 stars all become swords. And that one will just have to stay like that. Now we'll go ahead and apply the Fedaykin ability. That'll negate the shield. So this will be Carnage. First, the Atreides will resolve 5 hits on them. That's pretty terrible. They'll take 2 of them on Naib leaders. And then 3 more on 3 elites. And then the Harkonnen need to apply 7 hits, and that's going to wipe out all 7 of their figures. So amazingly, despite all those figures involved in that battle, it was just 1 round. The Atreides will pretty obviously choose not to advance, so that wraps up the battle. Now they can claim that prescience card that calls for them to attack a Harkonnen legion that's not in a settlement and cause at least 1 hit. They'll gain 1 on green and 1 on red, so they'll move both these tokens from 1 to 2. And that finishes their turn. The Harkonnen can't be too disappointed with that battle because they did a ton of damage to the Atreides Legion, and they weren't expecting that their own legion to last very long out there in the desert. But the one thing they were hoping for was, and certainly expected, is for the battle to go multiple rounds, because they actually already have 7 planning cards, and they're going to be drawing 3 more when they use Thufir's ability. So they were hoping to burn some cards in an extra round of battle and doing some additional damage to the Atreides. But that's how it worked out. And they're going to go ahead and spend this Mentat die, which will allow them to draw 3 House Harkonnen planning cards, which seems like overkill because that'll put them at 10. But they are planning to do an attack this turn, and that'll just give them some ammo to just keep feeding planning cards into an attack, and maybe use them up in a somewhat useful way. So they've got their 3 new cards, and that'll end their turn. Now that 1 Harkonnen Legion has been completely wiped out, the Atreides expect the Harkonnen to now shift their attention to this side of the board. And this is a level 2 siege that's very poorly defended. This token is just for 2 regulars. So they're going to spend their Bene Gesserit token that's in the deployment column and place, Gurney Halleck out here and a deployment token. Before they take their regular action, the Harkonnen can take a free action. They've accumulated enough cards now that they're able to use Hawat Scheming, which says that they, as a free action, discard 2 or 3 Hawat Scheming cards to remove Thufir from the game. Then Gaius enters play. So we'll discard these 2 cards and then remove Thufir. And Gaius's card will come into that onto the dashboard. And then we need to remove Thufir's figure and bring Gaius in. Now for the regular action, they're going to spend a deployment die and use Captain Aramsham's ability, which says deploy 2 regular units, 1 Sardaukar unit, and 1 leader, Bashar named, in 1 or more settlements. They're going to put all those units in the North Pole, which is very exposed right now. And then they'll put Gaius out there. They're not sure if that's the right call, but with Gaius's 3 shields on a star roll, as long as, if they're involved in a battle, if they roll a star, it's very hard for the Atreides to do any damage to them. Well, the Atreides may have made a bit of a blunder here. They've got a strategy die left, and they're in pretty good position to claim that water discipline card that requires that Paul and Jessica be in deep desert spaces. But unfortunately, Paul does not have a way of reaching a deep desert space. Even with these worms around him, he can't get all the way to deep desert. So they're going to have to give up on that one. Instead, they're going to spend the strategy die and use a Stilgar's special action, which says move 3 different legions. To start with, they're going to move this legion to move into this environmental testing station. The question is how many pieces to leave behind. They're thinking they should just stay at their full strength and count on there being worms available to get them back there if the Harkonnen next round make a move in that direction. So they'll move the whole legion, sand riding through the space and into the environmental testing station. And they'll reveal that, and that is a red. So they'll move up their Jihad token 1 space from 2 to 3, and that unlocks Chani. We'll bring her leader card into play and her figure. Oops. For their second move, they'll bring this legion back into the siege, and for their third move, they'll advance this unit into the minor erg to get into position to take this environmental testing station. But come to think of it, they are going to swing a little bit wider of these Harkonnen legions. The Harkonnen are going to spend their final die to play a planning card, and this one is Hard Times and Oppression. This says place 1 regular unit in each village, so we'll go ahead and do that. Villages would be the North Pole, Haga Basin, and what's this one called again? Arsunt. And then also the Imperial Basin, but that's already at 6 units, so that regular would just get booted right back out for being over their stacking limits. And then it goes on to say, and 1 elite unit in both Carthage and Arrakis. Place 1 there and 1 there. That ends their turn, and it ends the action phase. Now we're on to the Desert Hazards phase. We don't have any worm sign we need to clear, so we can just start putting out new ones. This time, we only need to put out 2. We don't have any Harkonnen legions out in the desert, so we just have these 2 harvesters. We'll go ahead and reveal them. Well, the Atreides hit pay dirt on that one. This one is burrowing, but it is in deep desert, so they'll add a worm there. Now they have to decide which of the existing worms they want to move over to fulfill this one. And actually the Wildmaker might be the one that's in the least useful position at the moment, so they'll go ahead and move him over here. Now the Harkonnen can use their carryall to save one of these harvesters, so they'll remove that and keep 1 harvester and remove the other one. We don't need to resolve any Coriolis storms, so we can move on to the spice harvesting phase. First, the Harkonnen need to deactivate any existing bans, and now figure out a way to spend their 2 spice. They do have a 3rd spice here, but I don't think that's going to do them any good. And there's no way they're going to avoid having one of these slide down to this row and cost them another die next round. So they're going to spend the 2 to keep this one in place. This is the one that allows them to have 6 units in a legion, and they'll slide these other 2 down. And that means they'll have to activate the bands that will keep them from doing scouting actions and from playing planning cards during a battle. All right, they'll remove their harvester from the board. Now we've got the end of round phase. The Atreides don't have any prescience cards they're able to claim, so we'll move on to some of the cleanup. Neither side's going to remove a named leader from the board. The Harkonnen will have to discard down to 6 cards. They have a lot of planning cards that are about putting new units in their settlements, so they'll pick one that they don't think will be useful. This one allows them to put units in Carthage, which is just kind of in the center of the plateau. They don't think it'll be meaningful, so they'll discard that one. Players have reset their leader cards, so now the Atreides need to decide if they're going to hang on to either of these prescience cards. They've already met their jihad requirements. That's the red one, so there's no point in keeping that. They'll remove that from the game. The water discipline, though, these would both be useful, so they'll reshuffle this into the deck. All right, we're into the new round. The players have drawn their new planning cards. We've drawn 3 new prescience cards. Now the Harkonnen need to do their vehicle placement. First, they've got to lock another die, and that means their allotment will this round will be 5 harvesters, 3 ornithopters, and 1 carryall. Their focus this round is going to be on the mobility of this legion. So they're going to put one here. And they always like that spot. And one over here. And it's tempting to put one here to give them the option of going after this open siege and forcing the Atreides to pull back to defend that. But they actually think they're going to go in this air zone, which will give them more flexibility to go this way, because actually probably the most poorly defended siege at this time is this one right here, because this one will take a little bit of work for the Atreides to get some more defenders in there. As to the harvesters, they're going to load them up down in this sector, and then they'll put one out here as well. And naturally, they'll put their carryall in this air zone. The dice rolls were super imbalanced for both sides this time, so they're both going to have to make some decisions. The Harkonnen had 5 strategy dice, so they filled up the strategy column, and they have to decide where to distribute these 2. They have 3 options: mentat, deployment, or leadership. They've got a ton of leaders here they need to get out onto the board. So they for sure want to do at least 1 deployment here. The Atreides choice is a little nerve-wracking just because you'd think it'd be automatic to go on the house space, but since that is an option. But there's always the threat of that Harkonnen planning card that can throw out one of the house dice. But whatever, this is the most flexible option, so they're going to go ahead with that and hope it works out. And now the Harkonnen have to decide on their other one, and they expect to be putting Feyd-Rautha out on the board at some point this round, and they want to be able to take advantage of his ability, which allows him to move and attack. So they'll make this other one a leadership die. Before they take the first action, the Atreides want to check out the new prescience cards. This one would give them a boost on Sand Dwellers, which is what they need the most. But this is end of round, and end of round phase, and it requires them to have legions in 3 mountain areas, which is, doable, but they don't want to spend the round, too early in the round committing to that and leaving themselves defenseless as to some of their sieges. So this is just one they're going to have to keep an eye on and see if the opportunity presents itself. This one looks the most manageable right now because it can be resolved immediately. During the round. It says spend 1 action die and remove 1 naive leader from a legion with a named leader in a sector not containing a Harkonnen legion. There are a couple other reasons they'd like to complete this besides the fact that they can resolve it during the round rather than having to wait. It would boost them 2 on Kwisatz Haderach, which would get them above the threshold for bringing Paul Muad'Dib into the game. And he's a much more powerful leader than just regular Paul. Also, they already have a legion that's perfectly set up for this. They have a naive leader with a named leader in a sector where there is not currently a Harkonnen legion. And I just realized they actually have 2 of those, because here's a naive leader with Stilgar in that same sector where there isn't a Harkonnen legion right now. The third one is going to be kind of tough to pull off. This requires Jessica and Paul to be together in the same siege. Now, Jessica is currently in a siege, but Paul is on the map quite a ways away and in an open desert space. So to get him in the same siege as Jessica probably means having him leave the board and then be deployed back on, which is probably going to be hard to pull off in a single round. The Atreides want to claim that prescience card right away that requires them to remove a Naib leader before a Harkonnen legion shows up in this sector. So they've spent a leadership die as that card requires. And now the question is which legion to remove a Naib leader from. They're going to make it this one, for one, because Gurney Halleck is a stronger leader than Stilgar, but also because they have a planning card that enables them to place 2 elite units in the area with Gurney Halleck, so they can quickly reinforce this area if they need to. In fact, it'd be great if they could tempt the Harkonnen to head this way, and then before they can actually launch their attack, add more units to that siege. And now they'll go ahead and claim that prescience card, and they'll move up a 1 on red and 2 on green, and that passes the threshold for Paul Muad'Dib, so he'll come into the game. We'll switch out the leader cards, and we'll replace Paul's figure. So far in this game, the Harkonnen have been moving their units around accompanied by pretty weak leaders. They're going to try to fix that now. They're going to spend a deployment die and use Captain Aramsham's ability, deploy 2 regular units, 1 Sardaukar unit, and a named leader in 1 or more settlements. For the regular units, they're going to beef up their defense in the North Pole and Haga Basin. They're going to place a Sardaukar in the Imperial Basin. That'll cause them to be overstacked, so they'll remove a regular. And then most importantly, they'll add Fade Rautha to this legion. I'm going to spend a moment talking about a planning card the Atreides really want to play, but aren't going to play, or at least not yet. And that's this one here that allows them to place 2 regular units on the board, each in an empty desert area of your choice. Then take a desert power action. And what they'd like to do is put a unit up here that has access to this environmental testing station, place one here that has access to a station here, and then they've already got a unit here adjacent to this ETS. Then on a subsequent turn, they could use Stilgar's special action that allows him to move 3 legions, move them all into these 3 mountain spaces and claim 3 environmental testing station tokens. That would be good in and of itself, but it would also work well with this prescience card that calls for them to have legions in 3 mountain areas at the end of the round. Also, because this planning card comes with a desert power action, it would enable them to put down some worm sign, well, either put down worm sign or move worms and get them access to the North Pole. Not that the North Pole is especially weak right now, but they have a very strong legion out here, and the Harkonnen can't play planning cards during the battle this round. But they're thinking launching this plan right now would be premature. The Harkonnen still have 5 dice left, and they're not in any particular hurry to go on the offensive because they can't play planning cards during a battle right now. They might even be content to more or less turtle this round, try to keep the Atreides from picking up any more points, and set themselves up to go on major offensives next round. So the Atreides are going to bide their time for now. Instead, they're going to take a desert power action to place Worm Sign. They're hoping to create an immediate threat that the Harkonnen have to deal with. So they'll put down a Worm Sign token right here. And the other one they'll put here so that if the Harkonnen do end up turtling a bit the rest of this round, they can maybe sneak out and grab this ETS token. The Harkonnen are thinking they can pretty easily make an attack on the North Pole unreasonable by using the Baron's ability. So they'll spend this die here, and that says they can replace 3 regular units on the board with 3 elite units. They'll replace 3 regulars in the North Pole with 3 elites. Now that the Harkonnen have shored up the defenses of the North Pole, the Atreides are thinking they might go ahead with that plan to put units into the desert areas just to keep the pressure up so that the Harkonnen can't focus on just building up for a campaign here. They're going to go ahead and spend the deployment die to play that planning card. Again, that card says they can place 2 regular units in empty desert areas of their choice. So they're going to put one here, so they are adjacent to this ETS token. And the other one they'll place here. The reason for that is not only are they adjacent to this token, but if the Harkonnen move in to protect that, they can at least move in here to be in a mountain space for the prescience card. Now that card also allows them to take a desert power action. They'll do an attack with this worm, and they'll go after this harvester hiding in the corner down here. Unfortunately for the Atreides, it's fairly obvious to the Harkonnen what they're trying to accomplish here, given that they've got a prescience card that requires going for mountains, and suddenly they've surrounded these mountain spaces with ETS tokens. But that doesn't mean the Harkonnen have an easy decision about how to deal with it. One thing they're considering is spending a strategy die and moving 2 legions to block a couple of these ETS tokens. The problem with that is it's clear that the Atreides have set themselves up pretty well to just go to adjacent mountain spaces and still fulfill the prescience card. Another option would be to attack one of these adjacent pieces. They're certainly in striking distance from either here or here against this unit, and would obviously knock him out pretty easily. But they've got another trick up their sleeve that they've been waiting the whole game for an opportunity to use, and they think the time is right to do it. They're going to spend a strategy die and play the card Reports of Traitors. Discard one of your opponent's unused action dice with a house result. So they'll discard that die. And that accomplishes 2 big things for them. For one, it obviously disrupts whatever plans the Atreides had going on. But also, it simply shortens the round. And in a round where they've got 2 Imperium bands, the sooner they can get through this round and get back to some of their full capabilities, the better off they are. And hopefully get back one of their locked dice as well. The Atreides just realized that they've been thinking about defending this siege wrong. They've been assuming that this region can reach there in 2 turns. But actually, there's only one ornithopter connected to that sector, and Feyd-Rautha isn't with that legion, so they don't have his movement capability. So the closest they could get with an ornithopter is within 2 of that siege, and then it would take them 2 more dice to reach that siege, unless they've got a special card, which is certainly possible. I don't know that it totally changes their thinking, but it might at least mean that they don't have to wait till their very last turn to use their final die on the chance that they'll have to backpedal to that siege. Now, one thing they have to consider is, since they lost a die, they do have 2 more desert power actions this round, so they can plan a little bit more long-term around that. So they're going to go ahead and take a desert power action right now, and they're going to use it to move 2 sandworms, and they're going to position them to hopefully take out a couple harvesters. So they're going to move this one, 1, 2, and they could move it here, but this space is still within range, and in case their plans change, this guy's a little closer to be able to move that way if needed. And the other one, they'll move 2 spaces to here, 1, 2, to get within range of this harvester. Now, moving 2 worms to be in position to attack harvesters might seem like overkill, since they only have 1 desert power action left this round. But they might actually end up with 2 desert power actions still, if they use Paul's special action, which starts with taking a desert power action. So now they're in position where they could actually do 2 worm attacks and take out 2 harvesters. And the reason taking out 2 harvesters would be so valuable to them is that gets the Harkonnen below the magic number of 6 spice. At just 5 dice, including this token, that would ensure that they aren't able to maintain all 3 of these Imperium tokens in the same position. which means that they'd either have to move one of these down and you lose yet another die, or move the yellow one down, which means that they're going to lose some units due to overstacking. For now, the Harkonnen are just going to keep building up their forces. They'll spend this strategy die, and they'll use the Emperor's special action, which says replace 3 elite units on the board with 3 Sardaukar units. So they'll take out these 3 elites and put in 3 Sardaukar. The Atreides are going to keep holding off on spending their last die, and instead they'll take a desert power action, and they'll remove this worm to remove this harvester. As a very loose rule, you'd usually want to remove a harvester that could be saved by a carryall over one that can't be saved. The Harkonnen are going to spend their strategy die to play a planning card. And this one says replace 2 elite units on the board with 2 Sardaukar units. So they'll replace an elite here, and they'll replace one over here. Now it says, then move 2 legions, each containing a Sardaukar. They'll remove this ornithopter to move this legion 2 spaces here. And they'll remove this ornithopter to move this legion 2 spaces to here. And it may seem crazy to entirely vacate this village with this Atreides unit so close, but they think they're more than able to respond in time if the Atreides decide to go that way. Well, the Atreides are feeling pretty desperate now. The Harkonnen only need 4 more supremacy points, and all the remaining sieges are either level 2 or 3. So the Harkonnen taking 2 sieges wins them the game, and they're extremely close to doing that. One thing they're considering is using their final die to play this planning card, which would allow them to put 2 elite units in with Gurney Halleck. Now, it's certainly better defend this siege, but this is an extremely strong Harkonnen Legion, and just playing defense at this point is probably a losing game. Another thing they're considering, and this has been their focus for a while now, is spending this leadership die to use Paul's special action, which would give them a desert power action and enable them to do a surprise attack with a legion with a leader. The problem with that is the only legion with a leader that's in any kind of position to do anything meaningful at all is this one right here, and that would be attacking the North Pole. The North Pole is well defended now, and a surprise attack alone is not going to give them enough firepower. So what they're going to do instead is spend their leadership die and play this planning card. This is basically just a roll of the dice, literally and figuratively. This says move or make a surprise attack with a legion with a leader. And here's the part that makes it better than using Paul's ability. If a battle starts, in the first round, your opponent cannot roll more than 4 combat dice. So they're going to sand ride into the North Pole and attack this legion. The Harkonnen have 6 units there, and the Atreides have 6 units here. So it would normally be 6 dice versus 6 dice, but because of the playing card, the Harkonnen will get 4 dice. And I'm going to put my little reminder out here that it's a surprise attack. Neither side can gain any dice by playing planning cards, so we'll just go ahead and roll the dice. The Atreides got another star, 3 swords, and 2 shields. The Harkonnen got 2 swords and 2 shields. We do have a couple special elites in this fight, so that'll eliminate 1 Atreides shield and 1 Harkonnen shield. The Atreides only have 1 leader, so 1 of these stars will go to waste. And with Paul Muad'Dib, this star becomes 2 swords and a shield. The sword and shield will negate each other, as will these 2. And the Paul Muad'Dib shield negates this sword, and that leaves the Atreides with 4 hits on the Harkonnen. The Harkonnen could have really used a star result to make use of Gaius's ability, but they're going to make sure he sticks around. Maybe they'll get a star next time. So they're going to apply their 4 hits to these 3 elites and this 1 Sardaukar and replace them with 4 regulars. The Atreides do have the upper hand now, but not by a whole lot. But like I said, they are desperate now, so they're definitely going to continue the battle. And it's into a settlement, so they're going to have to take a damage. They'll remove this elite and replace it with a regular. Both sides are at 6 dice now, and again, no benefit from playing planning cards, so they'll roll the dice. So first off, we'll apply the special elite here. That will take away a shield. One of these stars will go to waste. These 2 shields will negate these 2 swords. This shield will negate this sword. The Harkonnen star will become 3 shields from Gaius, which is huge. And the Atreides star becomes 2 swords and a shield. So these 3 swords will be negated by that star, and this sword will be negated by this shield. So there is no result. Except it bought the Harkonnen more time, because the Atreides are going to have to keep taking damage. The Atreides are going to continue the battle, and the Harkonnen obviously won't retreat. And for the damage they have to take, rather than apply it to this Fedaykin, they're going to take it on a regular and try to make up for that with playing some planning cards or discarding some planning cards. The dice would be 5 Atreides versus 6 Harkonnen. So the Atreides are going to discard I Am Stilgar, the Fremen, to get themselves up to 6 dice. And we'll go ahead and roll the dice. And it looks like the Atreides might break through a little bit this time. The Atreides do still have a Fedaykin, so that'll negate one of these shields. And then we'll do some more negating. The star goes to waste. This star becomes 2 swords and a shield. The shield will go to waste. This becomes 3 shields. So we have 4 swords and 3 shields. So the Atreides do 1 damage. And the Harkonnen will take that on a regular. The Atreides' chances aren't looking too good now. Every additional round of battle, not only are they taking damage, but the Harkonnen are getting a free die. But it's at least conceivable at this point, and it certainly won't be next round when the Harkonnen can play or discard planning cards for dice. So they're going to keep it going. And they'd love to keep this Fedaykin, but they don't have enough planning cards left, so they're going to have to keep some units involved here. Again, the Atreides are at 5 dice, and they'll spend their last planning card to boost that to 6. The Harkonnen are down to 5 units, but they get 1 extra die from that's being in a village, so it'll be 6v6. And if the Harkonnen get a star here, that's probably game. Well, nobody got a star. Well, this has really turned out to be a war of attrition. So these 2 swords and 2 shields negate each other. And these 3 shields and 3 swords negate each other. So each side will take a damage. They'll each remove a regular. Well, for the Atreides to continue the attack at this point would probably just be suicide, because they'd have to take a damage to continue the battle. And then that'd be 3 dice versus 5, and they're out of planning cards, so they're going to discontinue the attack. The Harkonnen feel great about how that battle went, so they feel they can afford to be patient. So instead of launching an attack now, they're going to spend their leadership die to play a planning card. That card says, move a legion containing a Sardaukar. And they want to cross this barrier, so they're going to remove this ornithopter and move them to an adjacent area here. Then it says, choose 1 enemy named leader that is in an area adjacent to this legion and place them in the regeneration tank. So they'll take Gurney Halleck out of there. They'll place them in the regeneration tank. That ends their turn, and that ends the action phase. Now we're in the desert hazards phase, and we just have 3 worm sign to place. We'll put one here, here, and here. Now we'll go ahead and start revealing them around the board. That one's nothing. Nothing. That would have been a nice spot for the Atreides. Nothing. Worm. And nothing. Pretty terrible result for the Atreides. So we've only got one worm sign with a worm on it, so we'll resolve that right now. And the Harkonnen will remove this carryall to save this harvester. Now we need to resolve Coriolis storms, and there's just one Harkonnen Legion exposed to those. The Atreides will roll 2 dice, and they get 1 hit. So the Harkonnen will trade out this elite for a regular. Now the Harkonnen can do their spice harvesting. They have 6 spice from their 3 harvesters in Deep Desert, and 1 more available from this token. They'll spend 2 to keep this marker in place, 2 to keep the black one in place, and the last 3 to move this blue one up 1 row to here. I just realized that I forgot to deactivate existing bands at the start of the spice harvesting phase, so we'll do that now. And I almost forgot, the extra spice was spent, so we need to flip that token over. And we'll take the harvesters off the board. Now we'll move on to end of round. Atreides can claim prescience cards. They haven't met the requirements for either of the 2 that are left. Harkonnen need to clear remaining vehicles. There's none left on the board. And now players can replace named leaders on the board with generic leaders. And actually, they might have to take a close look at that this time. Having lost Gurney Halleck here, the Atreides are considering pulling Paul out of this space to have him available to redeploy out here. The problem with that is Paul is still with a Legion where he can maybe do some good. And the Atreides do have Chani available, who's not quite as strong as Paul, but still useful. So it'd probably be more efficient to just focus on getting her deployed out to this area. That's assuming they do still want to bolster the defenses of this siege. They can lose 1 siege, they can't lose 2. Now the Atreides need to decide if they're going to hang on to either of these prescience cards. This one would move them up 2 on green. They still need 5 yellow. Anything that doesn't have yellow on it at this point, they're just not interested in. So they'll let this go out of the game. This is the one they were working on earlier, and they're still very close to achieving. So they're going to, and it gives them 1 on Sand Dweller. So they're going to hang on to this or shuffle it back into the deck. Players have already reset their leader cards, so we're ready to start the next round. Players have drawn their new planning cards, and 3 new prescience cards have been drawn. So now the Harkonnens need to place their vehicles. They still have 2 dice locked, so that puts them on the row where they'll get 5 harvesters, 3 ornithopters, and 1 carryall, just like last round. Their main concern is for mobility of this Legion here. They won't need an ornithopter to attack this siege, but then they will want one to be able to move rapidly on to another siege, or probably, assuming they get this Legion knocked down a bit, to kind of regroup here with these units. So they're going to place an ornithopter here, which will be touching the sector where they intend to do their first battle. And they're also going to put an ornithopter here, so if the Atreides try to commit this Legion to defense here, they can instead move that direction. And then they'll place one here to give this Legion the ability to move quickly in this direction toward that undefended siege. For the harvesters, there are 4 worms on the other side of the map, so they'll just load up this side. Well, with that placement, they don't have a way to protect any of these harvesters with a carryall, but in case they have a chance to place more later in the round, they'll place a carryall down here. Both players have rolled their action dice and put them on their dashboards, so now the Atreides need to take the first action turn. Before they even start worrying about the prescience cards, they need to get some more defenders out on these sieges, or this game's going to be over very quickly. They drew a couple planning cards that will help slow down the Harkonnen a little bit, so they're going to go ahead and spend their Mentat die and play a planning card. And this card by itself is pretty weak, but it does get them some extra time. It says choose 1 unused opponent action die. On the next turn, the Harkonnen player must use that die. then draw 2 planning cards or play 1 planning card. And the Harkonnen die they'll choose will be the house die, and that will ensure that the Harkonnen can't attack on their very first turn unless they happen to have a planning card that's suitable for that. And now instead of drawing 2 planning cards, the Atreides are going to play 1 planning card. And this one says, if a Harkonnen Legion is within 2 areas of a siege, place 1 deployment token in that siege, then draw 1 planning card. And here's a Harkonnen Legion right next to a siege, so the Atreides are going to place it here. Well, and the thought might be, well, why not just place it right here where the big Legion is about to attack? But they're actually hoping before the Harkonnen can attack that they'll be able to then use their deployment die and put not only a deployment token but also Chani in this location. So they'll place the token and they'll draw a planning card. And now to wrap up their turn, they'll move the die to the used dice area and advance Gurney Halleck in the regeneration tank. Well, the Harkonnen weren't super thrilled with that, but it wasn't the worst thing in the world. They're going to go ahead and spend that die that they're forced to use this turn. And it would certainly be nice to upgrade some of their units on the board using the Baron's power, but they've got a planning card that they think would be really annoying for the Atreides. So they're going to go ahead and use that die to play a planning card. And that card is Hunter Seeker. Choose 1 enemy named leader that is in an area in the same sector as a Harkonnen Legion. Place that leader in the regeneration tank. They've got Paul Muad'Dib here. He's in the same sector as a Harkonnen Legion. So they'll remove him from the map. And they'll put him in the regeneration tank. The benefit of this for the Harkonnen is not so much that they're removing Paul from a legion that was creating a threat for the North Pole. It's that there are now 2 prescience cards in play that require Paul to be in certain positions on the map. And with just 3 dice left, it will take the rest of the round just for the Atreides to get Paul back into play. So he's not going to be available to complete either of those prescience cards. The Atreides are finding the Harkonnen to be very annoying, and they thought that was supposed to be their own specialty. Well, they're going to go ahead and spend a deployment die and use Chani's special action, which is more or less the same as a regular deployment, but instead of just picking a random deployment token, they get to draw 2 and pick which one they like better. And they got a pretty strong one here, so they're going to put it into this siege and put Chani there as well. Now to wrap up their turn, they did spend a die this turn, so they can advance both of these figures in the regeneration tank. Well, the Harkonnen are thinking it's time to finally get aggressive here, so they're going to spend a leadership die, and they'll use Fade Routha's special ability, which says move and attack with the legion containing Fade Routha. They're going to shift their attention away from this siege, which has gotten a little bit ridiculous. So they're wishing they had positioned their ornithopters a little bit differently, but they can still make it work with what they want to do now. They're going to remove this ornithopter, which is connected to their current sector, and do a troop transport 2 spaces to here. Now for the attack, they're going to remove this ornithopter, which is connected to their new sector, and they'll attack the siege down here. We'll reveal the siege. That's a level 2, and we'll reveal the deployment token. And we'll replace that with 1 regular and 1 elite. The Harkonnen have 6 units in this legion. And the Atreides have 3 in theirs, and they'll get 2 more dice from the siege, so it'll be 6 dice versus 5. The Atreides could spend a planning card here, but it's a planning card that could still be useful, and they figure they might as well save it for the next battle where they might have a leader present that can make better use of a good roll. So we'll go ahead and roll the dice. Well, the Harkonnen didn't get a star, so not a great result for them. The Atreides have a naive leader present, so that star will become a sword. The Harkonnen have a bunch of Sardaukar, so this shield will go away for the Atreides. These 3 shields and 3 swords will negate each other. So the Harkonnen will have to take 1 hit and the Atreides 3. The Harkonnen will take it on a Sardaukar and replace it with a regular. And the Atreides will take 2 hits on their elite and 1 on their Naib leader. Now to continue the battle, the Harkonnen would have to take 1 damage, so they'll replace the Sardaukar with a regular. Now it'll be 6 dice to 4, and neither side is going to play a planning card. We'll roll the dice, and that is definitely going to wipe out the Atreides. The Sardaukar will knock out the Atreides 1 shield. This shield and sword will negate each other. Feyd-Rautha's star becomes 2 swords and a shield, so his 1 shield will knock out a sword, and that leaves them with 6 swords against 1 sword for the Atreides. So the Atreides are doing some meaningful damage. So the Harkonnen will remove a regular, and then the entire Atreides Legion will be wiped out. The Harkonnen will move in. They'll remove that siege token. They'll move up 2 on the supremacy track. And that means they have to give this Bene Gesserit token to the Atreides, but it won't be available till next round. And that ends their turn. The Atreides have 3 main options they're considering. One would be to use a desert power and use the Wildmaker's ability to basically teleport into this area. Another one would be to play a planning card that would allow them to remove a Harkonnen Ornithopter from the board and make an attack that's basically like a worm attack. Roll 3 combat dice and score 1 hit for every sword and star result. And that would certainly slow down the Harkonnen quite a bit and do some damage to them. But the third option they're looking at will get them some points and still allow them to play this card later. Now, going with this last option basically is dependent on the Harkonnen kind of slow playing this. The Atreides are hoping that the Harkonnen won't just immediately move in and try to attack, but they're thinking that is pretty unlikely because this is a significantly softened legion, and they're going against a pretty strong defense here. So they're going to do their third option, and that is they're going to spend a strategy die and use Stilgar's special action, which is move 3 different legions. And this will be finally fulfilling a plan they've been trying to make work for a long time. They're going to move this legion into this area and reveal this ETS token, and that is Sand Dwellers. They'll move this legion in here, reveal that token, and that's Kwisatz Haderach, and they'll move this one in here, and that is Kwisatz Haderach. And this is exactly what they were hoping for. Well, now that I do the math, actually, there was no way they could take 3 tokens and not unlock Aliyah. They'll move up 1 on Sand Dwellers, 2 on Kwisatz Haderach, and they'll bring Aliyah into play. It doesn't put her leader onto the board, but that's not where her value is. Her value is in her leader card. Now she'll be able to use her house die to remove a Harkonnen die and still play a planning card. And now, since the Atreides did use a die, they can advance these figures, and Gurney Halleck will become available again. The Harkonnen don't like the fact that the Atreides are going to be able to start messing with their dice now, but they still have 3 strategy dice, and they don't think they're going to need all 3 to finish this game out. But they don't want to lose this Mentat die, so they're going to go ahead and spend that. And they'll use Gaius's ability to draw 2 Carino ally planning cards and then play 1 planning card. The Harkonnen would have been fine with playing one of their existing planning cards, but they really like one of the new ones they drew. It says, if the Emperor is already in play, place Emperor Shaddam IV and 2 Sardaukar units in any legion. So they'll put the Emperor in here and 2 Sardaukar units, and that puts them at 7 units, so they'll have to remove 1. They'll remove this regular. The Atreides have 2 desert power actions left and 1 house die. And they really need to have 2 dice left to have a realistic chance, they're thinking here. And here's the problem. So one obvious move would be to spend the house die to do a deployment. They could get Gurney Halleck and a deployment token into this space. That would be great. They'd probably have a realistic chance of holding it this round. Another thing they could do, like we talked about earlier, was that they could use the house die to trigger Aaliyah's ability, which would remove a Harkonnen die and allow them to play a planning card, and they are holding a planning card that would allow them to remove this Ornithopter. That would probably make it so the Harkonnen can't attack that seats this turn unless they have a good planning card. The problem with both of these options is all they do is prolong the game into another round. And simply extending the game without scoring any points isn't going to do the Atreides any good. A long game favors the Harkonnen. They still only have 6 points on Sand Dwellers, and they have to get to 10 to win the game. And so they absolutely have to find a way to fulfill this prescience card. This is the one that calls for them to have legions in 2 minor Urg areas. And they're somewhat positioned to do that, but really they would have to commit the rest of their actions to fulfilling that. They do have 1 legion in position to enter a minor Urg area, but it's just 1 unit. So they're going to need to bring a unit from somewhere else, and that's going to require getting Worms or Worm Sign into position so they can sand ride into this area. So they're thinking of using a bit of a feint here. If they bring a worm into this area, the Harkonnen will think that that worm is being set up to defend, so that as soon as they move into the area, the worm will attack. But the Atreides will really be positioning the worm for sand riding. So they're going to use a desert power action, and they'll use the Wildmaker special action that says place 1 sandworm in an empty desert area of your choice. And note that it says place. Place means that it can come from off the board or from on the board. So they're going to move the Wildmaker from up here down to this space here, which will probably look a little bit fishy to the Harkonnen, because they'll be thinking, well, why not just place it right here where it's available to immediately attack and still defend the space if the Harkonnen Legion moves. But there's only so much they can do about that, because they need to leave this in a position where it can be used for sand riding. And what the Atreides are thinking then on the next turn, they can put down some worm sign so that this Legion here can sand ride all the way over to the minor Urg area. The Harkonnen are actually a little bit surprised that they still have 3 dice left. They thought for sure the Atreides would be using Aaliyah to steal one of their dice. They don't love the fact that there's a Wildmaker nearby now, but they're not going to let it mess with their plans too much. Their main goal is just to make sure they get adjacent to this siege this turn. So they'll be in position so that even if the Atreides do steal one of their remaining dice, they'll have 1 die left to go ahead and launch the attack. They don't want to move to this deep desert space, because the Wildmaker could do some really serious damage there. But if they move here to the plateau area, there's only so much the Wildmaker can do. And they have a planning card that allows them to put 2 elite units in the area with Fade Routha. So even if they do suffer some losses from the Wildmaker, they can rebuild a bit before launching the attack. So they're going to go ahead and spend a strategy die, and that will allow them to move 2 legions. They're going to remove this Ornithopter so they can do a troop transport and move this entire legion 2 spaces to here. And they are aware that there is that prescience card still out there that could be claimed if the Atreides get into these minor Urg areas. They're not sure there's a ton they can do about that, or and they certainly don't want to focus on stopping that. But since they can move a 2nd Legion, they're going to move these guys in here. And at least they're positioned to possibly mess with legions trying to come in here. And also they're in a position to reinforce this legion if they do suffer losses. Well, the Atreides just realized a flaw in their plan. Not that it was a great plan to begin with, because it depended on the miracle of the siege surviving. But if the siege did survive and they managed to get a unit into this minor erg space here, the Harkonnen will still have a die left, and they can just now use this legion to wipe them out. So the prospect of getting that prescience card just took a real hit. So they're just going to do it the old-fashioned way here, do a deployment, try to beef up the defenses, and see if it can hold off the Harkonnen for this round, and live to see another day. So they'll spend their house die, grab a random deployment token, and grab Gurney Halleck and put him in there as well. And who knows, between Reverend Mother Jessica and Gurney Halleck, if they roll multiple stars, they could put up a real fight. Oh, and by the way, since they did just use a die, that advances Paul, and he's now out of the regeneration tank. The Harkonnen have been going through their planning cards, hoping they had something that would allow them to do a surprise attack or some other special attack, but they don't have anything helpful, so they're just going to spend a strategy die and do a regular attack with one legion. They'll attack this area here, so we'll reveal the siege, and that's a 2 rather than a 3 at least, so that's a relief for the Harkonnen. And we'll reveal these tokens, and those are both really strong. So now the Harkonnen are suddenly nervous about whether or not they have enough firepower. So we've got 3 elites coming in and 1 Fedaykin. And of course the battle's in like the smallest area on the map. It's looking more and more likely that if the Harkonnen are successful, it'll be because they're sitting on 7 planning cards. If they didn't have that nice stack of cards to use in this battle, they might be in big trouble. It's probably hard for you to see the individual units, but all you really need to know at this point is that it'll be 6 dice versus 6 dice. All right, we'll go ahead and roll them. And not a single star in all those dice. The Harkonnen have 5 Sardaukar present, so that'll wipe out all 3 of these Atreides shields. The Atreides have 1 Fedaykin, so that'll wipe out 1 Harkonnen shield. These 2 will negate each other, so it'll be 4 hits by the Harkonnen and 2 by the Atreides. The Harkonnen will take both their hits on a Sardaukar, and the Atreides will take the 4 hits on their 4 elites, replacing them with 4 regulars. The Harkonnen are going to continue the battle, so they need to take 1 hit, and they really don't want to lose the Sardaukar's shield breaking ability, and they have plenty of planning cards to discard, so they're actually going to take that hit on this regular. That'll cost them a die. So right now they're looking at 4 dice versus 6, so the Harkonnen will discard 2 planning cards, and that'll make it 6 versus 6. We'll roll the dice. And that looks like big trouble for the Atreides. This is by far the most complicated roll we've had this game, so I'm going to use my little system for marking the stars. First, this one's excess. They don't have anyone to allocate this to, so that'll go away. Now this star, the Harkonnen will allocate to Fade Rautha, and that becomes 2 swords and a shield, and I'll mark that with cubes and discs. So 2 swords and a shield, and I'll just move that out of there. And then this one, they'll allocate to the Emperor, which becomes 2 swords, which I'll mark with 2 cubes. Then on the Atreides side, this star will be allocated to Gurney Halleck, and he's like Fade, so it'll become 2 swords and a shield. Now we'll resolve our special elites. So the Harkonnen have 4 Sardaukar, so that will eliminate up to 4 shields on the Atreides side. They only have 3, those will all go away. And then this Fedaykin will eliminate 1 shield on the Harkonnen side. We have 2 Harkonnen shields negating 2 Atreides swords. That leaves us with 5 hits by the Harkonnen and 3 by the Atreides. The Harkonnen will take 2 hits on this Sardaukar and 1 hit on this one, converting it to a regular. The Atreides will take one hit on their naive leader, the second and third one on this Fedaykin, the fourth on Lady Jessica, or Reverend Mother Jessica, and she'll go into the regeneration tank, and the fifth on a regular. The Harkonnen are somewhat considering discontinuing this battle because they do have another die left, and that would mean they could just spend that die for an attack again and not have to take a hit just to continue this battle. The problem with that, though, is the presence of the Wildmaker here. The Atreides would have a desert power action, and the Wildmaker could damage them enough to make this the next battle unwinnable. So they think they just have to keep this one going. They do still have 5 planning cards. They don't think they can afford to lose yet another die, though, because that means realistically they can only do one more round of battle. So they're going to actually take the hit on the Emperor. And we'll place the Emperor in the regeneration tank. The Atreides will still have 6 dice. The Harkonnen currently have 3, so they'll spend 3 planning cards. We'll roll the dice. That is probably as good a roll as the Atreides could have hoped for. This star will be allocated to Gurney and become 2 swords and a shield. And the Harkonnen didn't manage to roll a star, which is huge. We'll resolve the special elites. These 2 Sardaukar will eliminate up to 2 shields. Atreides only have 1. And the Atreides no longer have a Fedaykin, so these shields will stay in place for the Harkonnen. So these 2 shields will negate these 2 swords. We have 5 hits by the Atreides and 4 by the Harkonnen. If the Harkonnen want to keep Legion present there, they're going to have to knock Fade Routh out of the game. So they'll take 2 hits here, 2 hits on here, this one, and 1 on Fade Routh. Fade Routh goes into the regeneration tank. And the Atreides have basically the same problem. If they were to take all 4 hits on their units, they'd lose Gurney anyway. So they'll take 1 hit on Gurney and 3 others on their regulars. And Gurney goes into the tank. Well, the Harkonnen don't have a way of continuing the battle because they'd lose their last remaining unit. So it looks like the Atreides survived. For the Atreides' final action of the round, they only have a desert power action. So they've got to decide if they're going to place worm sign tokens, move worms, or attack with a worm. The only option they have on the board for a worm attack would be to attack with the Wildmaker on this plateau space here. But that seems like a bad use of their action, considering there's a decent chance that unit will be wiped out by Coriolis storms anyway. And they can't reach this Legion here because they're 2 spaces away, and the intervening space has to be desert, and this is minor erg. So another option would be to move a couple worms on the board. But with so many harvesters in deep desert, there's a good chance that they're going to have to spawn a number of worms over on that side of the map. So any worms they move now might end up having to be relocated anyway. So they're leaning toward a move that would just be hoping for some luck. They're thinking their only feasible chance in this game at this point is to advance Oppression's Marker up to level 8 and get Family Atomics and get a route into Arrakis. Because they do have a decent Legion up here. There's going to be probably 4 units and a couple leaders. And if they can move fast enough, they might be able to catch the Harkonnen before they have a chance to reinforce this area. So what they're going to do is put down a couple worm sign tokens and hope that during the Desert Hazards phase, at least one of them turns into a worm. That will make it easier for them to get in a position to do the Family Atomics here and get this Legion moved into this plateau. So there's 1 token and there's 2. The Harkonnen have a strategy die left, and they're not really in a position to launch any new attacks, so they're not going to do that. They do still have their Emperor's special action that would allow them to replace 3 elite units with 3 Sardaukar units, but their elites are kind of scattered around. They actually only have 3 elite units left on the board, here, here, and here, and they're not sure that having the Sardaukar spread out like that is going to do them a lot of good. So they're going to focus instead on getting into position to attack this siege over here. Right now their strongest legion is this one, but it's at only 5 units and it doesn't have a leader. So they're going to use their strategy die to move 2 legions. They're going to move this legion into this area. And then they're going to move this legion, but they'll only move 1 regular and a leader. The Harkonnen spent a die there so they can advance their leaders in the regeneration tank. And that'll end their turn, and the action turns phase. All right, now we're in the Desert Hazards phase. We don't have any worm sign tokens we need to remove, so we can go ahead and add new ones. There aren't any Harkonnen legions in desert spaces, so we just need to mark these harvesters. So we'll put out a worm sign on each of these. And then we'll start revealing them. That'll be a worm. Nothing. Worm. Worm. Nothing. Nothing. And nothing. So that gambit didn't pay off. So the Atreides need to place 3 worms. 1 will come from off the board. Another is pretty much off in no man's land, so he can probably safely be moved from there over to here. And the third one's probably an easy choice too, because they want to keep the Wildmaker here to help defend that siege. And they need this one for the mobility of this legion, so they'll move this one here. Now they'll resolve the effects of these worms. The Harkonnen don't have a carry-all to save any of these, so this one will come off, this one will come off, and this one. Now the Atreides will roll for Coriolis Storms. There's 2 Harkonnen legions that are exposed, one here and one here. So they'll roll for this one. And that's 2 hits. The Harkonnen will take 1 on their leader and 1 on their Sardaukar. Now for this legion, the star doesn't count in a plateau, but it doesn't matter because they got a sword and they only needed 1 hit. Now we're into the spice harvesting phase, and the Harkonnen have a tough decision here. They thought they were doing great on spice, but suddenly it dropped from 10 to 4. And 4 is a little tough to work with given their current situation, because they can only maintain the status quo on 2 of these markers. Considering that they're going to be trying to finish off a siege to end the game, they don't want to be knocked down to just 5 units in all their legions. And they want to be able to spend planning cards in battles. But if they don't spend 2 to keep this one in place, it'll drop down and cause them to lose another die. And that'll move them from 6 dice to 5. And you might think, well, 5 dice, that's plenty. That'll give them enough moves to be able to attack a siege and finish it off. But the problem is, when you get that low on dice, there's a very good chance that you won't even roll the dice you need to launch an attack. So they actually think they're going to take the hit on their planning cards. So they'll let this marker, so they'll keep this one in place, keep this one in place. They'll drop down the blue one, and that'll activate this ban. So they'll need to remember they can't play planning cards or spend planning cards for dice in battles. They'll remove their 2 remaining harvesters from the board and move on to the end of round phase. First, the Atreides can claim any prescience cards they've accomplished, but they struck out this round, which is really a disaster for them. Then we check for an Atreides win, which didn't happen. They're still well short. Then the Harkonnen can remove any vehicles left on the board. Neither side's going to replace any named leaders. We've flipped leader cards face up again. Players have discarded down to 6 cards. Actually, everybody's really low on cards now, so they didn't have to discard anything. Now the Atreides player needs to decide if they're going to remove any of the prescience cards from the game. And they do think they want to get rid of some of these. These are all cards that are accomplished at the end of a round, and the Atreides don't think they have that much time. But they probably can't afford to give up 3 different cards that all score on the yellow token, because that one needs to get to 10, and there may not be enough cards left in the prescience deck if they let these all go away. So they're going to keep the one that would give them 2 points on the yellow Sand Dwellers token, but then they'll let the other 2 go out of the game. Now the Harkonnen need to place their vehicles, and just like last round, they can place 5 Harvesters, 3 Ornithopters, and 1 Carryall. And their entire focus is going to be on the mobility of this Legion. They're going to for sure place one here, and one in the central plateau area, and then they'll place the other one here. So all 3 of these Ornithopters are in air zones connected to the sector with this Legion, and all 3 are connected to this Legion in the center that could conceivably move out to attack, say, in this direction. And they'll place their Harvesters down here in a sector where they'll actually be able to protect them with a Carryall. This one's actually in striking distance of the Wildmaker, but if the Atreides want to use the Wildmaker for that purpose, let them have it. And then they'll place the Carryall. Before they start taking actions, the Atreides need to take a look at the new prescience cards. And it feels like a bad draw. I guess they don't know exactly what's left in the deck, but only 1 card that can be resolved during the action phase. So that's going to be their focus. And that one is an Atreides Legion with a named leader moves to an empty desert area by sand riding. And that definitely seems possible to accomplish, so that'll be their focus this round. And that combos pretty well with what they're going to try to set up to do anyway, which is to get this Legion into position to attack through Rimwall West. And it can also position them to try to take this token here. Unfortunately, the prescience card only gives them 1 green, 1 yellow point, which would put them both at 7. So they're going to have to take this token and hope that it's either a yellow or a green. And actually, I think they maybe pulled 2 yellows already, so they're going to have to hope this is a green. They're going to have to hold off on that for a moment, though, even though holding off on completing these prescience cards has been killing them. But they have to get some defenders into this siege or the game's over in 2 turns. Luckily, between their dice roll and a couple new planning cards, they can manage to defend that reasonably well, at least. They're going to spend their Bene Gesserit token to take a deployment action. I probably should have mentioned that they did use their Bene Gesserit token this turn. No point in saving it since there probably won't be another round. And they placed it on deployment because they weren't allowed to place it in the house category. And they're going to place Paul and their last deployment token in this siege. To wrap up their turn, they'll advance Reverend Mother and Gurney in their regeneration tank and discard this Bene Gesserit token. Now that the Atreides have beefed up the defense of this siege a bit, the Harkonnen are kind of second-guessing their plan to go in there. I mean, even though they do have a strong legion there, but they're considering whether it might be easier to bring this legion down here, which only has 1 unit defending it. And not that this siege looks so terrible with just 1 token and Paul there, but they know that it's going to take them 2 turns to attack this. So they're assuming that the Atreides will manage to get these 4 guys into this space before they can reach it. So they're thinking maybe the thing to do is to try to soften this legion up so that whatever survivors make it back here won't add to the defense very much. So they're going to spend a strategy die and attack with a legion, and it's going to be this legion. Unfortunately, they don't have a leadership die because they would have spent that so they could make it a surprise attack. But they're going to use troop transport, so they'll remove this Ornithopter and they'll attack this legion. Right now it'll be 4 dice versus 4 dice, and the Harkonnen can't spend planning cards because of their ban. So it's up to the Atreides if they're going to spend any. The Atreides will discard 2 planning cards. One of these really hurts to give up. It was part of their plans, but they just feel like they cannot lose this battle because even if plenty of the units survive, if the Harkonnen are allowed to retreat this legion wherever they want, these units will be worthless in this defense. So they'll discard these 2 cards, and now it'll be 6 dice versus 4. They'll roll the dice, and without a star, the Harkonnen have big problems. It wasn't as bad for the Harkonnen as I initially thought, because I forgot the Atreides don't have a leader present, so the star will go to waste. These two swords and two shields negate each other, as do these two. So that leaves one Atreides hit on the Harkonnen, and they'll apply that to a regular. And the Harkonnen are going to continue the battle. The Atreides aren't in a settlement, so the Harkonnen don't have to take a hit. And as long as they've got that leader there, if they can just get a star, they can probably do some damage to the Atreides. So now it's going to be 3 dice versus 4 dice. Again, the Harkonnen can't discard a planning card. And the Atreides are going to spend 1. And they really hate doing that because they really wanted to use this card, but they cannot lose this battle. So it's 5 dice versus 3. Again, an Atreides star goes to waste, but more importantly, the Harkonnen didn't roll a star. The sword and shield will negate each other. The Atreides do 3 hits on the Harkonnen, so they'll take 1 on the leader. And that was Gaius, so we'll put him in the regeneration tank. And on 2 regulars. And the Atreides suffer 2 hits, so they'll take it on 2 regulars. And the Harkonnen feel like that could have gone better, but they accomplished their main purpose. They did thin this legion a bit, so they're not going to continue the battle. The Atreides didn't see that coming, and they're kind of wishing they had gotten that legion back to the siege while they still had 4 units. But this really changed the situation on the board, so now the Atreides are wondering if it's worth trying to attack the North Pole. They have a leadership die, and they would be able to use Paul's special action to take a desert power action and place a couple worm sign, and then sand right in there. This isn't a very powerful legion, but with the surprise attack that comes with the special action, they'd be almost guaranteed to win that battle. The problem with that plan, though, is the only point of doing that battle would be to advance in there for those prescience points. But if they do that, they're going to finish their turn in that space, and then the Harkonnen would be able to cut them off, either by attacking here or simply moving into this space. And now they're between Paul and the siege he's trying to defend. Another attack they could do to accomplish the same thing would be to attack with this unit into this undefended village. Problem with that is they'd have to use a house die for the attack, and even though those 3 prescience points would be great, it's not going to win them the game, and they're doing nothing to defend this exposed siege here. So they're thinking they still have to keep their actions focused on getting more defenders in this siege. And they're thinking the best way to do that would be to spend a house die and use Stilgar's ability to move 3 legions, because then they could move this legion, sand-ride them into the siege. That would build up the defense considerably. And then they could use the other 2 movements to accomplish some other stuff on the board, like that prescience card where they have to sand-ride into an empty desert space. They'd love to be able to use the Reverend Mother's ability and take a shot at drawing a useful planning card, but she's still in the regeneration tank, so that action would just be drawing 2 planning cards, which is not going to do them any good right now. But if they spend a die this turn, her action will be available next turn, so that's something to keep an eye on. So they're going to go ahead and spend a house die and use Stilgar's special action to move 3 legions. The first move will be the fairly obvious one of moving this legion, sand-riding them to the siege. Now, unfortunately, even though they were sand-riding, that wasn't a legion with a named leader, so it didn't fulfill the requirements of that prescience card the Atreides have had their eye on. This next move will be pretty gimmicky. It's just for the purpose of fulfilling the prescience card. Chani is going to take a deployment token since she can't move alone, and they will sand ride on this worm to this space here. And this isn't a terrible location. They're close to being able to get back to defend this siege. And also, there's just 2 intervening areas from this siege. So a desert power action and putting worm sign down would put them in a position to be able to help defend here if necessary. And now they'll go ahead and claim that prescience card. And that'll give them 1 green and 1 yellow. So they'll move both of these up from 6 to 7. And then this third move is the one they're least sure about because it's going to leave this siege undefended, but they're going to advance toward this environmental testing station. Because they figure they're going to have to take that at some point, and it gets them one area closer to Rimwall West, which will hopefully be blown open with family atomics at some point soon. And you may wonder why they didn't choose to leave a Legion behind defending this siege, but if they come out here too weak, they'll be subject to attack by the Harkonnen. And this way, if the Harkonnen cross this wall with a weak Legion, the Atreides can probably wipe them out. Well, one piece of good news for the Atreides is that now that they've spent that die, these leaders advance and the Reverend Mother becomes available again. And maybe they'll manage to get her on the board, which would be great. But more importantly, it makes her special action available again. And they're close to having Gurney available again, which would be great. The Harkonnen have two main concerns right now. One is that this Legion won't necessarily be successful in attacking that siege. Even though it currently only has probably 4 units, the Atreides would be rolling 6 dice, and with Paul Muad'Dib there, all they have to roll is 1 star and it becomes the equivalent of 8 dice. And this Legion just isn't that great. They just have a Bashar leader, they have only 1 Sardaukar and 1 elite. And on the chance that they're not successful, they have to worry about what's going on in other parts of the board. And the Atreides are just 1 turn from having family atomics and 2 turns from being able to do an attack into Arrakis. And Arrakis isn't very well defended right now, just 2 regulars and 1 elite. They would get to roll 6 dice because that's a level 3 settlement. But if the Atreides manage to beef up this Legion anymore, with Stilgar there and a Bashar leader, they could very well succeed in this attack on Arrakis. And really, I guess I should say they have 3 main problems they're worrying about, because another major one is that all their named leaders are off the map right now. And in fact, 3 of them are in the regeneration tank, meaning that they're not able to use their special actions. But they do still have 5 dice available, so they have a little bit of time. They're thinking they can take their time, spend a couple dice, get at least the Emperor back into play. And they think they have a pretty good planning card to play, so they're just going to spend this die and play a planning card. There's a Mentat die over in the house column. That was a house die, but got bombed, and I didn't notice it for a while, so that'll be fixed later. And that card is called Baron's Personal Guard. It says, place Baron Harkonnen and 2 elite units in the Carthag or Arrakeen settlements. So they'll go with Arrakeen, they'll place the Baron there, and 2 elites. And then the last part of the card says, then move any legion. They're going to use troop transport, so they'll remove this ornithopter and move this legion 2 spaces to right here. They'll move the spent die and advance everybody in the regeneration tank, and they've almost got the Emperor back. If the Atreides had any planning cards at all, they would probably seize the initiative and do a surprise attack on this legion. Because, with a guaranteed star result with Paul Muad'Dib, that's pretty powerful. But with just 4, this would be 4 dice versus 6, so that it's just too unlikely to be successful. Well, the Atreides need to find a way to deal with this pending attack. If they had a useful planning card already, they'd love to spend this house die to use Alea's ability to remove the Harkonnen's last strategy die and, play the planning card. But without having a planning card to play, just spending this die to get rid of a Harkonnen die is pointless. But the Reverend Mother is back in play now, so her special action is available. So the Atreides are going to spend this house die as a Mentat die and draw 2 planning cards and play one of them. And just hope they get something useful. They decided to go with 2 Fremen ally cards. Okay, I have to laugh here because one of the cards was pretty weak, but one of them was so perfect that anyone watching this video is going to think it's a setup. But I swear to God, this was a legit random draw. The card is Still Suits. and it says move any legion that is in a desert area. So we'll do that in a second. But then it says, then swap the position of all deployment tokens between two different sieges, even if a siege has none. And that's obviously going to enable them to max out the defenses of this siege. But first, they got to do the move. And again, it's a legion that's in a desert area. They were considering using this opportunity to get Chani and this deployment token back into defensive position here, but they want to keep the pressure on the Harkonnen. This environmental testing station may very well get them to family atomics, so they're going to take these two leaders and these two deployment tokens and move them here. And then they'll reveal the token, and that is a yellow. Okay, so I was thinking they had used up all the yellows. I guess I could have checked that easily enough. So they'll remove that, and they'll move the Sand Dwellers token from 7 to 8. And that activates Family Atomics. They'll choose the Rimwell West map piece, and that'll be desert now from now on. And for the swap of deployment tokens between two sieges, they'll take one from here, move it over to this siege, and move these two over here. They'll flip over the Reverend Mother's card. They'll move the die into the use dice area and advance Gurney, and he's available now. The Harkonnen have to consider the possibility that the Atreides are within 1 point of winning the game. We happen to know better, but from the Harkonnen perspective, this yellow moving from 8 to 9 might be all it takes. And the Atreides are already in position to claim this card at the end of the round, which requires having legions in 3 different mountain areas. Also, the Harkonnen have 3 very vulnerable villages. They could focus on trying to defend all those avenues for points that the Atreides have, but it feels safer for the Harkonnen to just focus on getting the win this round. And they've been saying that pretty much every round of the game, but it's feeling more critical than ever now. There are 4 sieges left for them to go after, and as we've talked about, this one isn't looking too good for them. This is just too well defended, has the Atreides' strongest leader and probably 6 units there. One positive aspect of this for the Harkonnen is that this legion has this strong Atreides legion pinned here, because if they ever move out of there, the Harkonnen will just instantly attack and take over that siege. This siege down here is intriguing because it just has 1 unit defending it, and the Harkonnen do have a couple of units pretty close by. But right now, it would be 2 dice against 3, probably 4 because the Atreides have a planning card. So they'd be looking at trying to do a gradual build-up, turn these regulars into elites, turn the elites into Sardaukar, and then that would maybe be a reasonable attack. But as soon as they start making those kinds of preparations, it'll be obvious to the Atreides that this is where they intend to attack, and they could easily toss down a couple worm sign and have Chani sand-ride right in here. In fact, using Paul Muad'Dib's special action, they could do that in a single turn. That leaves these 2 sieges. And the problem with these 2 is that the only Harkonnen legion set up to make an assault on those is defending Arrakis. And the Atreides have a pretty powerful legion set up within striking distance of Arrakis. So the moment the Harkonnen leave a weak force there, it's Arrakis doomed, and that'll end the game. And you might think, well, Arrakis a level 3 settlement, so it shouldn't require many defenders against this legion here. But if they break up this legion and leave some behind and take some out, the weakened legion that they leave with will just get picked off by this Atreides legion. So they are thinking that they need to go after this siege, but not by going past the Atreides, but by going through them. But they don't feel secure enough yet with that attack. It would currently be 5 dice against 4, but the Atreides do have a planning card, and all it would take is for the Atreides to roll a star and the Harkonnen to not roll one, and they'd have a problem on their hands. And the odds are probably in their favor right now, but they don't want to just barely get through this battle and be so weak that if Chani manages to slip over here, that they can't take the siege. So they're going to do some more building up of their forces. They're going to spend this deployment die and use Captain Aramsham's special ability. It says deploy 2 regular units, 1 Sardaukar, and 1 leader, Bashar named, in 1 or more settlements. So they can split them up. We use the captain's special action, so we need to flip over that card, which I chronically forget to do. So they'll for sure place the captain. They'll place the Sardaukar in Arrakis with this big legion. And that legion's at their stacking limits, so they'll place the 2 regulars here in the Imperial Basin, and they'll place the captain there as well. And you might think, well, why not place the captain in the main legion? Because he's better at attacking than the Baron. But they have plans for the Emperor with this legion in a later turn, and having a leader here as a defender might be useful. And now that the turn's done, they can advance their leaders in the regeneration tank, and now the Emperor is available again. Well, the Atreides can see that this legion is probably doomed if they just sit around and wait for these Harkonnen to attack them. So the temptation would be to just back up to the siege they had been defending earlier. But they happen to know something the Harkonnen don't, that just 1 more Sand Dweller prescience point is not going to be enough for them to win the game this round. They need 2 points on that yellow token, and they're in position to get 1 from a prescience card, but they need to take over a settlement as well. Unfortunately, the only way they have to launch an attack is with a leader, so they can't use this legion to just march in here and take over that village. So they're thinking they'll use Paul Muad'Dib's special action, which will be to take a desert power action and then do a surprise attack. So they could get a worm or worm sign in here, do a surprise attack on this legion, presumably conquer that settlement, and leave the Harkonnen in a position where they have to worry about that remaining legion attacking Arrakis. So they'll spend the die, flip over the card. Now the question is, what kind of desert power action should they take? Well, they need to be able to stand right in here, so they either need to place Worm Sign or use the Wildmaker's special ability to just place a worm. And they definitely want to place a worm, because not only will they be able to sand ride in using that worm, but that worm will be able to get in a pot shot if one of these legions exits to one of these desert spaces. Then the question is, which worm? The obvious choice would be the Wildmaker, but the Atreides feel like he's serving too important a defensive purpose here. With this Harkonnen Legion here, the Atreides don't expect to be moving this Legion anytime soon, so they're actually going to move this worm and place him on Rimwall West. Now they can do a surprise attack with the Legion with the leader, so they'll attack with this Legion, sand riding into the Imperial Basin. They'll go ahead and reveal their own tokens. And this is a pretty strong legion. This token will be replaced with 2 Fedaykin. And this one with an elite and a regular. We'll reveal the village token. So it'll be 3 dice versus 4. They'd like to spend a planning card to make this as quick and decisive as possible, but they're pretty sure that planning card would be more useful in a later battle. And the Harkonnen can't discard a planning card, so we'll go ahead and roll the dice. I'm going to put my little surprise attack reminder out here. The Atreides overdid it a bit on the stars, but it should still work out for them. So 1 will go to waste. This one they'll allocate to Stilgar, and that'll become 2 swords. This one they'll allocate to their naive leader, and that'll become another sword. Now they'll resolve their Fedaykin abilities, and that will wipe out the 1 Harkonnen shield. This shield and this sword will negate each other. So it'll be 4 hits by the Atreides and 2 by the Harkonnen. The Atreides will apply 1 to their elite. And they're a little unsure about this one, but they'll apply it to their naive leader. And on the Harkonnen side, those 4 hits will wipe them out. And Captain Aramsham will go into the regeneration tank. The Atreides Legion will choose to advance. Oops. Now remove that token. And that settlement was a level 1, so they'll move up all 3 of their tokens 1 space. The Harkonnen are worried that they made a mistake by not finding a way to clog this lane, because this is a much worse situation than they anticipated. This was a surprisingly powerful legion, and they're still powerful even after having defeated that settlement. And the Harkonnen are not sure how they can slip past them now to go after this siege. It's just dawning on them now what a nightmare situation this is with this worm here. Because the Harkonnen obviously want to use their ornithopter to move a couple spaces to get closer to the siege. But either one of these 2 spaces, the Atreides can just come out and do a surprise attack on them with their last leadership die. So it would have to be a substantial force that comes out here to be able to withstand an attack. But if they do that, they're leaving Arrakis 2 undefended, and the Atreides would instead just attack there. Now the Harkonnen do have a strong legion themselves right here, and they could certainly attack this legion and probably wipe them out. But then they're directing all their attention the wrong direction. To use one of their dice to attack here and not make any progress this way means they're probably not going to get here this round and are probably going to lose the game. With no leadership dice and just 1 strategy die, it might look like they're already in big trouble. So I should show you the card that they're resting their hopes on. This card says, if the Emperor is already in play, which he is, he's sitting there on our dashboard right now, not in the tank, place Emperor Shaddam IV in a legion containing a Sardaukar, then move and make a surprise attack with this legion. The key part there is move and make a surprise attack. So as long as they can get him and a legion within 2 areas of this siege, they would be able to move and attack even without having an ornithopter. And the 2 areas that make this feasible are these 2 right here, because they could use an ornithopter to reach either of these 2 spaces and still be within 2 areas of that siege. But those are the exact 2 spaces that the Atreides Legion can easily reach. Now, if circumstances were a little bit different, they could deal with that problem by just moving 2 small legions out, and the Atreides could only attack one of them. And that would leave the other to be able to join up with the Emperor and go attack that siege. But they only have 1 ornithopter, and they couldn't use 1 ornithopter and drop off pieces in 2 different areas. So now they're thinking about going back to this siege that they had dismissed earlier. They could spend a die to upgrade these from regulars to elites, spend another die to upgrade them from elites to Sardaukar, then with their final die, have the Emperor join them and move and attack. The problem with that is it's a 3-step process, and as soon as they begin that process, the Atreides will recognize what's going on and have Chani swing down to protect that siege. She can no longer do it in just 1 turn, but she can do it in 2 turns, which is fewer turns than the Harkonnen need right now. And you might think, well, why not just turn them into elites, then have their Emperor join them and go attack? The Emperor, though, with this card has to be placed in a legion with Sardaukar, so there's no way to shorten the process. For now, though, they think they can get away with upgrading in 2 different legions and keep the Atreides guessing and forcing them to commit with Chani, one way or the other. So they'll spend their house die and use the Baron's special action, which is to replace 3 regular units on the board with 3 elite units. So they'll replace these 2, and they'll replace this one in Arrakis. And now that their turn is done, that will bring Fade Rautha back into play. But it's probably a little bit too late for that to do them any good. The Atreides are trying to figure out which siege is most in danger right now. They know the Harkonnen have a strategy die and a Mentat die left. If the Harkonnen don't have a card that allows them to do an attack, that means the Harkonnen couldn't conceivably take out one of the Sieges this turn, and that would mean that they're probably just going to keep their fingers crossed that the Atreides need one more oppressions point and try to stop them from completing one of their prescience cards, which would mean attacking a Legion in a mountain to take them down from 3 to 2. If they do have a planning card that allows them to do an attack, then it could conceivably be this Siege, because they could spend a strategy die to move and then play the planning card to attack. So if that were the case, they'd want to move Chani down there to protect that Siege. But if the Harkonnen have a card that allows them to move and attack, then they could also reach this one. So they're thinking it's most likely the Siege they have to defend, but it may be this one. They thought they were in a good position with this Legion to stop the Harkonnen from moving this way, but they've noticed a little quirk in the map situation. Let's assume the Harkonnen have a card that allows them to move and attack. That means this turn they might try to move some of these units out to one of these two spaces, and then the following turn attack this Siege. But they can't move very many of these out of here, otherwise they'd be too likely to lose Arrakis. So let's say the Harkonnen decide to move 3 elites out of here using the Ornithopter to this space. The Atreides would be confident that they could sand ride, do a surprise attack, and defeat them. But then the problem is, where do they retreat them to? They wouldn't be able to retreat them over this boundary. They can't retreat them into the sandworm. If they retreat them here, they're still within 2 spaces of the Siege. If they retreat them any of these other spaces, they're still within 2. And if they retreat them here, suddenly they're within 2 of this Siege. At least this one does have some defenders. So actually, they think this Siege is the least of their problems. They think they can cause the Harkonnen to have to either go after this one or this one. This one is actually better defended right now than this one. So they have 1 desert power action left, so they're going to use it to place Worm Sign to enable Chani to go protect that Siege. So they'll place 1 here and 1 here. Now that the Atreides have the ability next turn to swoop down into this Siege, the Harkonnen need to give up on the idea of building these guys up further and attacking down there. Even if these become 2 Sardaukar and they bring in the Emperor, when they roll into here, Chani's going to have 2 units with her. There'll be a 3rd one here, so it's going to be 5 dice versus 2. And it's just not reasonable to think they'll win that attack. And that means making a push for this Siege. So they're going to spend their strategy die so they can move 2 legions. They'll do a troop transport, so they'll remove this Ornithopter. And now they have the difficult task of determining how many of these units they can move out of Arrakis without losing Arrakis to this Atreides Legion. They want to move out as many as possible. They know for sure they have to move the Sardaukar because the planning card they're planning to use requires having a Sardaukar in the Legion where the Emperor joins in. So they'll move the Sardaukar out 2 spaces to here. So for sure 2 more elites. And they're going to go ahead with the 1 more. And then for their second movement, they'll move this elite over to here. And this looks like a pretty weak remainder. Just 2 elites, a regular, and the Baron. But it's a level 3 settlement, and those can be deceptively difficult to destroy. So they're going to take their shot with that. Hope the Atreides decide this is too much to take on. And it leaves them with a strong enough legion here that they would definitely survive a first round of battle and hopefully be strong enough to probably end up moving on down here when the Atreides retreat them. Well, the Atreides are down to their last turn. They have a leadership die, so they'll spend that. They've already used Paul Muad'Dib's special action, so they'll just do a regular surprise attack. And now the question is, do they go for Arrakis or not? If you've ever played a game with the mechanic I split and you choose, this is a good example right here. The Harkonnen split that legion and basically said, you can take your pick, but they're both going to be tough. This is a surprise attack, so the Atreides are tempted. They will get an automatic, at least in the first round, get an automatic 2 swords from Stilgar. But going into this with just 4 units, knowing that the Harkonnen will get 3 bonus dice every round of battle, that's just too daunting. I haven't done the math to figure out who has better odds, but they think their chances are better of doing significant enough damage to this legion that they would have trouble then attacking this siege, which is a level 2 and will have 2 defenders, so we'll have 4 dice. And they'll have, for the first round, they'll have a planning card to make it 5. So they're going to do their attack on this legion. I'm going to mark it with our little surprise attack marker. And the Atreides were thinking they were going to save their planning card for when the Harkonnen attack a siege, but actually they're going to go ahead and spend it right now because they're hoping they can wear down this legion enough so that they have to give up the Sardaukar, which will make it tougher for this legion to then wear down the defenses of a siege if they don't have the Sardaukar special ability. So it's going to be, instead of 4 dice, it'll be 5 dice versus 4. They'll roll the dice. Well, the Atreides are disappointed they rolled so many shields because they're not concerned about damage to their own legion. They want to maximize damage to this legion. But they are saved a bit by this surprise attack. They'll allocate that star to Stilgar, and that will become 2 swords. I'll use my little cube markers here. The Harkonnen don't have a leader, so this star will go away. The Harkonnen have 1 Sardaukar, so an Atreides shield will go away. The Atreides have 2 Fedaykin, but there's no Harkonnen stars to do away with anyway. So these 2 shields and 2 swords will negate each other. And that'll leave 1 damage by the Harkonnen and 4 damage by the Atreides. The Atreides will take the damage on one of their Fedaykin. And for the Harkonnen, for sure 3 of them, they'll just take on these 3 elites and replace them with 3 regulars. And unfortunately, that 4th damage, they can't take on the Sardaukar because they need that piece to be there for the Emperor to be able to join them. So they're going to have to take it on a regular. Now the Atreides will choose to continue the battle. They don't have to take a hit because this legion isn't in a settlement. The Harkonnen will choose to retreat, so they're going to move them down here. Well, this should be the final regular action turn of the game. The Harkonnen have a chance to end it right now. They're going to spend their Mentat die, use Gaius' ability to draw 2 Carino ally planning cards and play 1. They already have a card they're planning to play, but they'll draw a couple and see if something even better turns up. They didn't draw anything close to being as good as the card they were planning to play, so they'll go ahead and play it. This really is a phenomenal card. So it says they can place the Emperor in a legion containing a Sardaukar. So they'll bring him in. Then move and make a surprise attack with this legion. So they'll move to here and attack this siege. We'll reveal this token, and it is for a Fedaykin and a regular. We'll reveal the siege token. That's a 2. This is a surprise attack, so I'll put that reminder out. It'll be 4 dice versus 3, and neither side is able to discard planning cards, so we'll go ahead and roll them. For the Emperor, stars become swords, so we'll remove this and replace it with 2 swords. And the Harkonnen have an excess sword. We'll apply the 2 special elites. So this Sardaukar will remove this shield. This Fedaykin will remove this shield. So it'll be 3 hits versus 3 hits. So 1, 2, 3. And 1, 2, 3. The Atreides are wiped out. The Harkonnen will advance in and destroy that settlement. They'll move up 2 on the supremacy track, and that ends the game. Well, thanks for sticking it out to the end. I hope you agree with me that it was a really tense and fun, epic struggle. It did feel like the Atreides were, behind and in danger of losing a lot throughout the game, but by the end, it definitely could have gone either way. I think my takeaway from this, even though the Atreides did almost win, is that they can't get into a defensive stance too early. In this game, it felt like they started just focusing on defending their sieges and kind of stagnated, and kind of in the mid-game weren't making many points and advancing toward their own goals. And obviously they can't just let the Harkonnen just march through their sieges or the game will be over in a couple rounds. But they do have to make sure that they're not losing sight of their own goals, because a long game favors the Harkonnen. As we saw in this game, the Atreides had run out of deployment tokens. Definitely, if it had gone one more round, they would have been just crushed. Let me know if there were major decision points where you would have done things differently. The obvious one, in my mind, and probably in yours, is when the Atreides decided to not try to conquer Arrakis near the end there, and instead followed that Harkonnen Legion out and tried to wear them down. They didn't wear them down enough, and the Harkonnen went on to win the game. But obviously in a long game like this, there's dozens of places where different decisions could have been made, and probably better decisions. So don't hesitate to leave any comments below. Otherwise, thanks for watching, and I hope I'll see you for the next video.